For centuries, Zen masters have shared stories that gently guide us back to a place of peace, away from the noise and worry of daily life. These stories are not about complicated teachings or hard-to-understand philosophies. They are simple yet profound truths that speak directly to our hearts. Before we begin, take a moment to notice the rhythm of your breath. Let it slow and deepen naturally, without effort. There's no need to rush or understand everything right away. Just let the wisdom of these stories wash over you. Each Zen story we'll explore tonight is a step toward a kind of inner calm that not only helps us find peace but also brings the deep, restorative sleep we so often seek. The wisdom of Zen reminds us that peace is not something we must go searching for, not something that lives far away. Peace is always right here, waiting in this moment, in this breath. Relax. Breathe slowly. And let's begin this gentle journey together. Let's begin. Master Kaito's temple was nestled on the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by a bamboo grove that swayed gently in the breeze. The bamboo was tall and graceful, its green stalks reaching for the sky, growing in perfect harmony with the earth. The grove was a place of peace, where time seemed to slow down, and the mind could wander without worry. For years, Master Kaito had cared for this grove, and it was said that his heart and the bamboo were as one, connected through the act of tending to the plants. Every day, Master Kaito would visit the grove with a sharp, well-worn sickle in hand. He would trim the bamboo, cutting away any branches that had become too wild or overgrown. He worked quietly, focused on the task at hand, his movements slow and deliberate. It was a simple task, but one that required patience and mindfulness. The act of pruning the bamboo was, to him, more than just a chore. It was a way to practice inner stillness and cultivate a sense of balance in his heart. One morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, a young monk named Ryota approached Master Kaito as he worked in the grove. Ryota had been studying under Master Kaito for some time and had learned much about the ways of Zen, but there was still much he didn't understand. He had observed his teacher for weeks, watching as Master Kaito cut the bamboo with such care and attention. And one day, his curiosity got the better of him. "Master," Ryota asked, "why do you spend so much time cutting bamboo? The bamboo grows wild again. It doesn't need your help to grow. Why do you waste time on plants that will simply return to their natural state?" Master Kaito paused in his work, the sickle resting lightly in his hand. He looked at Ryota with kind eyes, his expression calm and thoughtful. There was no anger or irritation in his gaze, only the quiet wisdom of someone who had lived a long, peaceful life. He motioned for Ryota to sit beside him on the ground, and the young monk did so, waiting for his teacher's response. "I am not cutting bamboo," Master Kaito said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 gentle truths. "I am pruning my impatience." Ryota was puzzled. "But Master, the bamboo grows wild again." "It doesn't need you to trim it. Surely there's a better use of your time." Master Kaito smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that seemed to suggest that Ryota was not the first to ask this question, and likely wouldn't be the last. "You see, Ryota," he said, "it's not the bamboo that needs trimming, it is the mind, my mind, your mind, all of our minds." Ryota was still confused. How can cutting bamboo be the same as tending to the mind? Master Kaito gazed out at the grove of bamboo, his eyes following the sway of the tall stalks in the wind. "When I cut the bamboo," he explained, "I am not just removing the excess growth of the plants, I am removing the excess growth of my own thoughts. I am cutting away the impatience, the distractions, and the restlessness that cloud my mind. Just as the bamboo grows wild again, so do the distractions of the mind. They come and go, but they do not need to control us." Ryota sat quietly, thinking about this. He had heard the words before about how the mind can be full of clutter, how it can become overwhelmed by thoughts. desires, and fears, but hearing it from Master Kaito in the context of the bamboo made it seem so simple, so clear. Master Kaito continued, "Impatience is like the wild growth of the bamboo. It grows quickly and uncontrollably. But with patience, we can trim it, just as we trim the bamboo. We can bring our minds back to stillness, to simplicity, to the present moment. This is what Zen teaches us." Ryota nodded slowly, beginning to understand. He had always struggled with impatience, with a restless mind that would jump from one thought to another. It was difficult for him to sit still, to be present in the moment without thinking about the future or rehashing the past. But here, in the grove, surrounded by the calm presence of the bamboo and his teacher's words, he began to see how much of his impatience was self-created. It was a habit, one that he had cultivated over time without even realizing it. "Master," Ryota said, his voice hesitant, "how do I begin to trim my own impatience? How do I stop my mind from wandering so much?" Master Kaito smiled again, his eyes twinkling with quiet amusement. "You begin, Ryota, by simply noticing. When your mind begins to wander, when impatience starts to take hold, notice it. Don't try to push it away, don't try to force it to stop. Just notice it, and in that noticing, you create space. The more you notice your thoughts, the less power they have over you." Ryota thought about this. It seemed so simple, yet so difficult. He had spent so much time trying to control his thoughts, trying to force them into stillness. He had never considered that simply observing them could be enough. "Master, is that all? Just notice." "That is enough," Master Kaito said, his voice soft but firm. "The bamboo grows naturally, and so do your thoughts. They come and go, and that is their nature. But if you are not careful, if you do not trim them, they will overwhelm you, just as the bamboo can become overgrown if not tended to. By noticing, you begin to detach yourself from them. You learn to let them pass without getting caught up in them." The young monk sat quietly, reflecting on his teacher's words. He felt a sense of calm beginning to settle in his heart. It was as though a weight had been lifted, a weight he hadn't even known he was carrying. The simple act of noticing, of observing his thoughts without judgment, felt like the beginning of something new. Master Kaito resumed his work, carefully trimming another stalk of bamboo. Ryota watched him, his mind still, for the first time in what felt like ages. It was then that he understood the deeper lesson that Master Kaito had been teaching all along. The bamboo was not just a plant, it was a mirror for the mind. Just as the bamboo needed attention to grow properly, so did his mind. Just as the bamboo needed trimming to keep it healthy, so did his impatience need to be trimmed away, one thought at a time. Days passed, and Ryota continued to study under Master Kaito. He spent his mornings in the bamboo grove, silently observing his teacher as he worked. Ryota took to the practice of noticing his thoughts, of observing the moments when impatience or distraction arose in his mind. At first, it was difficult. His thoughts were stubborn, and sometimes it felt like they would never stop racing. But little by little, he began to see the spaces between the thoughts, the moments of stillness that were always there, waiting to be noticed. One day, Ryota found himself standing beside Master Kaito in the grove, looking out at the bamboo. He had noticed, for the first time, how beautiful the grove was. Not just the bamboo, but the light filtering through the leaves, the way the wind moved through the stalks, the way the earth smelled after the rain. He realized that in the past, he had always been too busy, too distracted, to see these simple things. "Master," Ryota said, his voice full of gratitude, "I understand now. I see the bamboo, and I see my mind. When I trim the bamboo, I am trimming my impatience. And when I notice my thoughts, I am trimming the distractions of my mind." Master Kaito looked at Ryota with a quiet smile. "Yes, Ryota, the bamboo is a reflection of you. And just as you tend to the bamboo, so too must you tend to your mind. It is a practice, a lifelong practice. But with patience, you will find that the mind becomes more like the bamboo, strong, flexible, and at peace with the flow of life. Ryota nodded, his heart full of peace. He had learned a lesson that could not be taught in books, a lesson that could only be learned through stillness and observation. He now understood that peace was not something to be found outside of himself. It was something that could be cultivated moment by moment through the simple act of noticing, and so Ryota continued his practice, tending to his mind as carefully as Master Kaito tended to the bamboo. In time, he found that his impatience lessened, his thoughts became quieter, and his heart became more at peace. Each day, he trimmed the bamboo in his mind, and with each passing day, the bamboo grew taller, stronger, and more graceful, just as his mind did. The bamboo whispered to him, and in the stillness, he finally heard it. In a peaceful corner of the mountains, nestled between tall trees and the whispers of the wind, stood Shingon Monastery. It was a place of calm, where monks lived their lives in quiet devotion, spending their days meditating, praying, and tending to the tasks of their temple. At the center of the monastery was a great bell, forged many years ago by the hands of a skilled artisan. The bell was a symbol of the monastery's rhythm, calling the monks to prayer and marking the passing of time with its deep, resonant tone. For many years, the bell had rung out across the valley, its sound echoing through the trees and over the hills. It was the voice of the monastery, a reminder of the present moment, calling the monks back to their practice. But one night, a great storm swept through the valley. The winds howled, and the rain came down in torrents. As the storm raged, the great bell of Shingon Monastery cracked. Its once perfect tone shattered, leaving only a deep, hollow silence. The next morning, as the sun rose and the storm passed, the monks gathered around the bell. The damage was clear. The crack ran through the bell's center, making it impossible to ring as it once had. The monks were quiet, unsure of what to do. They had grown so accustomed to the bell's sound that its silence now felt like a loss. Abbot Jiro, the wise leader of the monastery, stood before the bell, observing it with a calm expression. His face was weathered with age, his eyes reflecting years of meditation and understanding. He was known for his quiet wisdom, his ability to see beyond the surface and into the heart of things. The monks gathered around him, waiting for guidance. "Master," Mika, a young monk, said respectfully, "what shall we do? The bell is broken. Its sound was a vital part of our daily life. Shall we repair it or replace it?" Abbot Jiro turned to Mika, his eyes soft with compassion. "The bell no longer rings, but silence has entered its place," he said. "We will not repair it. We will not replace it. Let silence ring." The monks were puzzled. They had always believed that the bell was necessary to mark the hours, to call them to their tasks, and to gather them for meditation. The bell had been a symbol of the monastery's rhythm, but now, in the stillness of the morning, they heard something new, a silence that was not empty but full of presence, as though the very air itself had taken on the sound of the bell. Mika, curious and eager to learn, approached the abbot. "Master, how can silence be a sound? I do not understand. How can we live without the bell?" Abbot Jiro smiled gently, his voice calm. "Silence is not the absence of sound, Mika. It is the presence of everything else. When we stop relying on the ringing of the bell to tell us the time, we can begin to hear the other sounds that have always been there, the rustling of the leaves, the soft hum of the wind, the gentle flow of the river, the song of the birds. These sounds have always been around us, but we did not listen to them because we were too focused on the bell." Mika looked up at the sky, listening intently. At first, all he could hear was the sound of his own thoughts. But as he stood there in silence, he began to notice the subtle sounds of the world around him. The wind, gentle and constant, moved through the trees, making a sound like the softest whisper. The leaves rustled, their edges brushing together in a dance with the breeze. Far off in the distance, the river could be heard, its flow smooth and steady. The silence of the bell had opened a new world of sound to Mika, one that had always been there, but had gone unnoticed in the constant clamor of life. He felt a deep sense of peace settle over him, as though the world itself was breathing in harmony with his own breath. Over the next few days, the monks of Shingon Monastery adapted to the new rhythm of their lives. They no longer waited for the bell to signal the start of their meditation or to call them to the next task. Instead, they relied on the subtle sounds of the world around them to guide them. The wind became their bell, its whispering voice gently reminding them to return to the present moment. The rustling leaves became their timekeeper, marking the passing of the hours with their soft, natural song. One afternoon, as Mika was sitting by the river, deep in thought, he noticed something strange. The wind had shifted, and the sound of the river had changed. The once calm and steady flow had become a more complex sound, gentler, more melodic. Mika closed his eyes and listened carefully. The sound of the river was not simply water flowing over rocks, it was the river speaking in its own language. He could hear the subtle variations in the flow, the way the water moved around obstacles, the way it rose and fell with the natural rhythm of the earth. It was as if the river, like the wind, had learned to sing its own song, a song that spoke of the deep interconnectedness of all things. Mika felt a deep sense of gratitude in his heart. He had come to understand that silence was not an absence, but a presence, an invitation to listen more deeply, to hear the subtle rhythms of the world. He realized that the storm had not taken something from them. It had opened a new door to a deeper understanding of the world around them. As the days passed, the monks of Shingon Monastery continued to live in harmony with the silence. They no longer needed the bell to tell them when to pray or when to meditate. Instead, they listened to the world, to the wind and the trees, to the river and the birds, to the silence that spoke more clearly than any sound. The monastery became a place of deeper peace, a place where the monks could live in full awareness of the present moment. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Abbot Jiro gathered the monks together. They sat in a circle around him, waiting for his words. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with hues of orange and pink. There was a soft, peaceful silence that hung in the air, as though the world itself had paused to listen. Silence, the abbot began, his voice gentle but firm, is not something we need to fill with sound. It is a gift, a teacher that shows us how to listen. When the bell cracked and broke, we were given the opportunity to discover this silence. And in that silence, we discovered a deeper way of hearing. The wind speaks to us, the river speaks to us, the trees speak to us, all in their own way, all in the silence that is always present. The monks nodded, understanding more deeply with each passing word. They had learned that true peace does not come from external things, it comes from within. The bell, once a symbol of time and structure, had been replaced by a deeper understanding of the natural rhythms of life. The sound of the bell had been loud and clear, but the silence that followed was even louder, more powerful, because it allowed them to hear what had always been there. That night, as the monks settled into their meditation, they no longer waited for the bell to signal the beginning of their practice. Instead, they began with a deep, conscious breath, allowing the silence to fill them. They listened to the subtle sounds of the world around them, the wind in the trees, the rustle of leaves, the soft hum of the earth, and they let these sounds guide them back to the present moment. In the quiet of that evening, Mika found himself in a deep state of peace, a peace that did not rely on external circumstances or the sound of the bell. It was a peace that came from within, a peace that was always there, waiting to be discovered. He smiled, knowing that the storm had not taken something from them, it had given them a gift. The bell may have cracked, but silence had learned to sing. And in that song, the monks had found their truest peace. Master Daiki was a monk who lived in a quiet temple by a peaceful lake. The temple was not large, but it was surrounded by tall trees, and the sound of the water flowing gently added to the serenity of the place. Master Daiki was known for his calm presence and deep meditation. He spent hours each day sitting beside the lake, his eyes closed, his mind focused, and his heart peaceful. There, he would sit for hours without moving, becoming one with the lake, the trees, and the sky. One day, a young novice named Haruto arrived at the temple, eager to learn from Master Daiki. Haruto had heard of the master's wisdom and wanted to experience his teachings firsthand. He was young and eager to learn, but his mind was often filled with restless thoughts. It was difficult for him to sit still for long periods of time, and he struggled with the practice of meditation. He hoped that Master Daiki could help him find the peace he longed for. On his first day at the temple, Haruto was invited by Master Daiki to join him beside the lake. The air was cool, and the sky was clear. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the gentle rippling of the water and the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. As Haruto sat beside the master, he could not help but notice something remarkable. A crane stood motionless at the edge of the lake. It was tall and graceful, its feathers gleaming white in the sunlight. The crane stood as if it were frozen, completely still, without a single movement. Haruto watched the crane for a while, mesmerized by its stillness. He had never seen anything so calm, so perfectly still. After what seemed like hours, Haruto turned to Master Daiki and asked, "Master, how can the crane stay so still? It has not moved at all. How can it do that?" Master Daiki opened his eyes and looked at the crane. His gaze was gentle, filled with understanding. He took a slow, deep breath and replied, "The crane does not try to be still, Haruto. Stillness is not something it creates. It is something it returns to." Haruto was puzzled. "But Master, it has been standing there for hours without moving. How can it not try to stay still?" Master Daiki smiled softly. "Stillness is not about effort. It is not about trying to make yourself still. It is about letting go of everything that keeps you from being still. The crane does not force itself to stand still. It simply allows itself to be where it is. It is present with the lake, with the sky, with the world around it. It does not need to move. It is at peace with the moment." Haruto sat quietly, thinking about what the master had said. He had always believed that stillness was something that needed to be achieved, something that required effort. When he meditated, he would try hard to keep his mind still, to stop his thoughts from wandering. But the more he tried, the more restless he became. He began to realize that Master Daiki was teaching him something different. Perhaps stillness was not something to be forced, but something to be discovered. Master Daiki continued, "The crane does not struggle against the world. It does not fight the wind or the water. It simply stands, trusting that in this moment it does not need to do anything. It is simply being. When you stop trying so hard, you will find that stillness is already here, within you." Haruto thought about this for a long time. He realized that, just like the crane, he had been fighting against his own restlessness. He had been trying to force his mind into stillness, thinking that if he tried hard enough, he could make his thoughts stop. But now, he understood that true stillness came from letting go. It was not something he could create. It was something he could return to. As the days passed, Haruto continued to sit beside Master Daiki by the lake. He spent time observing the crane, watching how it would stand still for hours, its eyes focused on the water. Each time Haruto's mind would wander or become restless, he would remember the crane's stillness. He would take a deep breath and allow himself to return to the present moment, letting go of the need to force his thoughts into stillness. One day, after sitting for a long time, Haruto noticed something else. The crane had not moved, but now the wind began to pick up. The crane's feathers rustled slightly, but it did not move from its spot. It stood as calm as ever, as the wind brushed against it. Haruto marveled at how the crane was not disturbed by the wind. It did not try to fight it or avoid it. It simply allowed the wind to pass, knowing that it would not be blown away. The crane remained in its place, still and unwavering. Master Daiki, who had been watching the crane as well, spoke quietly. Stillness does not mean being unmoved, it means being at peace, no matter what happens around you. The crane does not resist the wind. It knows that it cannot control the wind, but it can remain steady, rooted in the present moment. It is not disturbed by what it cannot control. Haruto began to understand even more deeply. He had often felt that his thoughts were like the wind, uncontrollable and unpredictable. But the crane taught him that he did not have to fight against the wind. Instead, he could learn to be steady, no matter how much his thoughts might swirl around him. Stillness was not about controlling the thoughts. It was about allowing them to come and go without being swept away by them. As the weeks went by, Haruto's meditation practice deepened. He no longer tried to force his thoughts into silence. Instead, he allowed them to rise and fall, like the waves on the lake. When his mind became restless, he remembered the crane, standing perfectly still amidst the changes around it. He learned to return to that stillness, to find peace in the midst of his thoughts, just as the crane found peace in the midst of the wind. One morning, as Haruto sat by the lake, Master Daiki joined him, sitting quietly beside him. The air was cool, and the lake was still. The crane stood at its usual spot, unmoving. Haruto turned to the master and said, "Master, I think I understand now. Stillness is not something I need to create. It is something I can return to. It is already here, in this moment." Master Daiki nodded, his eyes filled with quiet approval. "Yes, Haruto, stillness is always here, within you. You do not need to search for it. You only need to stop chasing after everything else. Let go of the desire to control, to force things to be different. When you let go, you return to your true nature, which is stillness." Haruto sat quietly, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had learned an important lesson that day. He had learned that stillness was not about effort or struggle. It was about returning to the present moment, allowing himself to be at peace with what was. Like the crane, he could stand steady, no matter what the world brought his way. From that day forward, Haruto practiced meditation with a new understanding. He no longer fought his restless thoughts or tried to silence them. Instead, he simply returned to the present moment, allowing himself to be still in the midst of it all. And as he sat by the lake, watching the crane stand perfectly still, he understood that true peace was not something he had to create. It was already there, waiting for him to return to it. In the quiet mountains, hidden in the folds of the earth, stood a small temple where Zen Master Yuki taught his students. The temple was humble, with wooden floors worn smooth from years of use, and simple windows that let in the soft light of dawn. The surrounding landscape was filled with towering trees and the occasional flicker of animals moving through the forest. It was a place of deep stillness where the world felt calm and free from the rush of daily life. Master Yuki was known for his wisdom and his gentle approach to teaching. He did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried great weight. He believed that the lessons of life were not always taught through words, but through simple experiences. His students would often find themselves learning profound truths not from lectures, but from small moments that would unfold naturally in their daily routines. One afternoon, Master Yuki was sitting with his student, Sora, in the temple's small dining area. The sun was beginning to set, casting warm light across the room, and a soft breeze carried the scent of pine through the open window. Sora had been working with Master Yuki for some time and was learning the ways of Zen, but he struggled with letting go of his desires and his constant need to do everything perfectly. He would often rush through his tasks, trying to finish them as quickly as possible, and he became frustrated when things did not go as planned. On this day, Sora was preparing rice for their evening meal. He filled a large bowl, carefully measuring the rice, and then poured water into it, making sure to stir it just right. But as he was bringing the bowl to the table, his hand slipped and the rice spilled everywhere, scattering across the floor. Master Yuki, who had been watching quietly, smiled softly. He did not say anything at first, but Sora looked down at the spilled rice with a frown, clearly disappointed in himself. "Why did you let it spill?" Master Yuki asked, his voice gentle but filled with curiosity. Sora sighed and bent down to clean up the rice. "I was too careless. I didn't hold the bowl properly," he said, feeling ashamed of his mistake. "I was trying to move too fast, and it ended up making a mess." Master Yuki nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Sora. "You were trying to fill the bowl, but in your hurry, you missed the chance to notice what you were doing. You were too focused on filling the bowl, but you forgot to be present with it." Sora looked at the master, unsure of what he meant. "But master, I was just trying to serve us the rice. It was important to me." Master Yuki smiled, his eyes kind and understanding. "It is important, yes, but sometimes, when we are focused on the result, we miss the present moment. The bowl can only hold so much. If it is already full, there is no room for more. When you try to rush through things, you may not leave space for what is truly needed." Sora sat silently, considering the master's words. He had always been focused on the end result, always trying to accomplish things as quickly as possible, but he began to see that Master Yuki was teaching him something deeper. It was not just about filling the bowl, it was about understanding when it was full and when it needed to be emptied. Master Yuki gestured for Sora to sit down beside him. "Your bowl teaches what words cannot. When it is full, it can no longer receive. But if you empty it, if you allow it to be empty for a moment, then it has the capacity to receive again." Sora nodded, still not fully understanding. "So, you mean I should have let the bowl be empty before filling it?" Master Yuki smiled. "In a way, yes. The bowl teaches us to be present, to allow space for what is truly needed. When you rush, you are not allowing for the space to receive what is necessary. You are filling the bowl with your own ideas of what should be. But when you take the time to be present, you make room for what is truly needed in that moment." Sora looked at the bowl, his mind turning over the master's words. He realized that he had been filling his life with tasks and worries, trying to achieve goals without pausing to truly experience the present. He had been so focused on what needed to be done that he had forgotten to notice the beauty of each moment. After a long silence, Master Yuki spoke again. "When we are full, there is no room to receive, but when we are empty, we create space for the world to enter. This is not just about the bowl, it is about your life. When you fill your life with hurry and distractions, there is no room for peace. But when you create space, when you allow yourself to be empty, you make room for the present moment." Sora's eyes widened as the meaning of Master Yuki's words began to sink in. He had been living his life as if it were a race, constantly trying to fill it with achievements, tasks, and goals. He had not realized that in doing so, he had been closing himself off from the quiet beauty of the present moment. He had been so focused on filling the bowl of his life that he had never stopped to consider whether it was truly necessary to do so. "Master," Sora said slowly, "how do I know when the bowl is full? How do I know when to stop and allow space for the present?" Master Yuki's expression softened, and he looked out the window at the fading light. "The bowl is full when your mind is clouded with worry, when you are rushing from one thing to the next without taking time to breathe. When you are not present, When you are not aware of what is happening around you, that is when the bowl is full. But when you can pause, when you can breathe deeply and look around you with clear eyes, you will know that the bowl is empty, and you will be ready to receive what is needed. Sora thought about this for a moment, then looked at the bowl in front of him. He realized that the lesson was not just about rice, it was about his whole life. The bowl was a reflection of his own mind, and just as the bowl could only hold so much, his mind could only hold so much before it became overwhelmed. To truly receive the fullness of life, he needed to empty his mind and allow space for the present moment. "I see now," Sora said quietly. "I have been so focused on what I have to do next that I have not made room for the present moment. I have been trying to fill my life with things, but I need to learn to make space instead." Master Yuki nodded, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, Sora. Life is not about constantly filling the bowl. It is about knowing when to stop, when to let go, and when to allow yourself to be empty. When you are empty, you are open to receive the richness of life in each moment." From that day forward, Sora made a conscious effort to empty his mind and create space for the present moment. He no longer rushed through his tasks, trying to fill his life with accomplishments. Instead, he focused on being present with each task, allowing the space to breathe and feel the fullness of the moment. He realized that in doing so, he was able to experience life more deeply, more fully than he ever had before. As the days passed, Sora found that he was able to meditate with a clearer mind, to serve others with a more open heart, and to enjoy the simple moments of life without the constant need to hurry. The lessons of the bowl had become a guiding principle for him, teaching him to empty his mind and make space for peace. And as he sat with Master Yuki in the temple, Sora understood that the true richness of life came not from filling his bowl, but from allowing himself to be empty and open to whatever the present moment had to offer. Years later, Sora would often recall the lesson of the empty bowl, and he would smile to himself. He had learned that when the bowl is full, it can no longer receive. But when it is empty, it can hold the fullness of life itself. One cool autumn morning, Sensei Rei sat beneath an old tree in the temple garden, watching the leaves fall gently to the ground. The air was crisp, and the earth was filled with the earthy scent of damp leaves. The tree, strong and ancient, stood tall, its branches heavy with leaves that had turned gold and red with the season. A few of the leaves fluttered down, drifting slowly, almost as if they were dancing on the wind. Taro, a young monk who had been studying under Sensei Rei for several months, sat beside him, his eyes wide with quiet contemplation. Taro had grown up in a small village where change was always met with resistance. He had been taught that growth and success meant holding on tightly to what was familiar, to what had always been. Change, in his world, was something to be feared and avoided. He struggled to understand why things had to change. Why did leaves fall? Why did life seem to shift with the seasons? On this particular day, Taro watched as one leaf, golden and vibrant, broke free from the tree's embrace. It fell slowly, swirling gently in the breeze before landing softly on the ground. As it touched the earth, Taro's face filled with sorrow. Without thinking, he began to weep quietly, his chest tightening with emotion. Sensei Rei, who had been watching Taro out of the corner of his eye, turned his head slowly toward him. "Why do you cry, Taro?" the wise teacher asked, his voice calm, yet filled with curiosity. Taro wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve and looked up at Sensei Rei. "The leaf has fallen," he said, his voice heavy with grief. "It has left the tree. It is gone." The teacher remained still, his gaze soft but filled with understanding. He reached out and gently placed his hand on Taro's shoulder. "Taro, the leaf does not die. It joins the soil." Taro looked at the teacher, confused. "But Sensei, it has fallen. It is no longer on the tree. It is gone." Sensei Ray smiled gently, as if he had been waiting for this moment, knowing that it was time for Taro to understand something deeper. The leaf has fallen, yes, but its journey does not end. It becomes part of the earth, nourishing the soil that supports new life. It does not vanish. It simply changes. Taro stared at the leaf, now resting on the ground. It seemed so final to him. Once it had fallen, it felt as though it had disappeared, as if it no longer mattered. Taro had always feared the thought of losing something, of something changing. He feared that when things changed, they were lost forever. His mind clung to the idea that what was gone could never return, that when something was no longer there, it was gone for good. "Sensei," Taro said after a moment, his voice filled with quiet curiosity, "if the leaf joins the soil, does that mean it becomes something else?" Sensei Ray nodded slowly, his voice soft and measured. "Yes, Taro, the leaf becomes part of the earth. It nourishes the soil, which in turn nourishes the tree and all the life around it. The leaf does not disappear, it transforms. It becomes something new, something that will help future growth." Taro sat silently, reflecting on what the teacher had said. He had always feared loss. He feared the change that came with the passing of time. He had seen things he loved slip away and felt as though they had vanished into nothingness. The idea that things could transform, that something could change and still remain a part of something larger, was a new thought for him. He looked down at the leaf again, feeling a small shift within himself. It was still there, after all. It had not disappeared. It had simply changed. Perhaps, Taro thought, he, too, could learn to embrace the changes in his own life, to understand that the things he loved could transform and still have meaning. He could let go, knowing that in letting go, he would make room for something new. Sensei Ray, sensing Taro's shift in understanding, spoke again. "Taro, you must not fear change. It is the nature of life to transform. The leaf teaches us that even in falling, there is no loss. There is only the next step, the next stage of growth. You cannot stop the seasons from changing. You cannot stop the wind from blowing or the leaves from falling. All of life is in constant motion." Taro looked at the teacher, feeling a deep sense of peace begin to settle in his heart. "But Sensei, what if I am afraid of what comes after? What if I don't know what will happen when something changes? How can I embrace it if I don't know where it leads?" Sensei Ray chuckled softly, his eyes sparkling with gentle wisdom. "Ah, Taro, that is the very question that all of us must ask ourselves. And the answer is simple. You don't need to know what comes next. You only need to trust that the leaf's journey is part of a larger whole. The tree does not know where the wind will carry its leaves, but it knows that they will return to the earth, becoming part of something new. You, too, can trust that every change in your life is part of something larger, something beautiful, and even when you cannot see it, you can know that each moment is connected to the next." Taro took a deep breath, feeling a lightness in his chest that he had not felt in years. The fear of change, which had always weighed him down, was starting to lift. For the first time, he saw that change was not something to fear, it was something to embrace. The leaf had fallen, and in that falling, it had not ended. It had simply become something new. As the sun began to set, casting a soft golden light across the temple garden, Sensei Ray and Taro sat in silence. The breeze picked up, and more leaves began to fall, drifting gently to the ground. Taro looked around him, watching as each leaf took its turn in the cycle of life. He could feel the earth beneath him, alive with the energy of growth and transformation. He understood now that the leaf's journey was a reflection of his own. The next day, Taro began to see the world with new eyes. When the wind picked up and leaves began to fall, he no longer felt sorrow. Instead, He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the way the seasons flowed, for the way life moved in cycles. He saw that each falling leaf was part of a larger plan, and that change was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. He could let go of what was passing, knowing that it was not gone forever. It was simply transforming into something new. In the days that followed, Taro's meditation practice deepened. He no longer resisted the changes within his own heart. He began to let go of his attachments, knowing that the more he clung to what was familiar, the more he would suffer. Just as the leaf fell without resistance, he, too, could let go of the past and allow himself to be carried by the winds of change. Years passed, and Taro became a teacher in his own right, sharing the wisdom he had learned from Sensei Rei. One autumn day, as he sat beneath a tree in his own garden, he watched the leaves fall once more. He no longer wept for them. Instead, he smiled, knowing that each leaf was part of the great cycle of life, falling, changing, and returning to the earth, ready to nourish the next generation. When a young student asked him why the leaves fell each year, Taro would smile and say, "The leaf does not die, it joins the soil, and in that joining, it makes way for new life, new growth." Why then do we fear our own changes? We too can trust the process. We too can fall and become part of something greater than ourselves. And with that, the circle of life continued, as it always had, and as it always would. One evening, in a quiet temple perched high on the side of a mountain, monk Tetsuo sat in the dim light of his small room. The temple was humble, made of wood and stone, nestled amidst trees that swayed in the evening breeze. The monks who lived there practiced meditation, study, and contemplation, seeking peace in each moment. The mountain was a place of stillness, where the noise of the world below could barely reach, allowing for deep reflection and simplicity. Monk Tetsuo had spent many years at the temple. He had come as a young man, eager to learn the teachings of Zen, hoping to find clarity in the quietude of the mountains. Now, he was older, with a deeper understanding, but he had not lost his sense of wonder for the simple moments of life. He often found himself marveling at the beauty of the moon, the silence of the night, and the gentle flickering of a candle's light. That evening, like many others, Tetsuo found himself in his small room, sitting at a simple wooden table, ready to study his sutras. He had already spent time meditating in the garden and had received the evening meal. Now, as the night grew darker, he lit a small candle to help him see the pages of his book. The flame flickered gently in the stillness, casting soft shadows on the walls. As he read, the light from the candle illuminated the words on the page, and Tetsuo's mind focused on the teachings. He read slowly, savoring each word, each phrase, allowing the meaning to settle in his heart. The candle was small, but its light was enough to guide him through the text. There was a quiet peace in the flickering flame, a peace that seemed to match the quietness of the temple and the world beyond. But then, as Tetsuo read, the moon began to rise outside his window. It was a full moon, bright and vast, shining with an intensity that seemed to fill the entire sky. Tetsuo paused for a moment, his eyes drifting to the window. He could see the moon through the thin paper of the shoji screen, glowing softly but powerfully. The light from the moon seemed to fill the room, and Tetsuo felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. The small candle's flame, now so tiny in comparison to the vastness of the moonlight, seemed almost insignificant in the face of such beauty. With a soft breath, Tetsuo reached out and blew out the candle. The room grew dark, save for the gentle light of the moon streaming through the window. As the last of the candle's flame flickered and vanished, Tetsuo whispered to himself, "The small light helped me see the Great One." For a moment, he sat still in the darkness, watching the moon's light pour into the room. It was a quiet and profound moment, one that seemed to carry all the wisdom of the universe. The small light of the candle had served its purpose. It had shown him the way when the night was still and the world around him was dark. But now, the vast light of the moon had arrived, filling the room and offering a clarity that the candle could never match. Tetsuo's thoughts drifted to the teachings of Zen. He realized that the small candle's light was like the teachings of a beginner, the first step on the path to understanding. The candle's flame illuminated the words, but it was the moon's light that illuminated the entire world, shining with clarity and depth. In the same way, our understanding of Zen begins with small steps, simple lessons and teachings that light the way, but the true wisdom comes when we allow ourselves to step beyond the small light and embrace the vastness of the present moment. The candle is the beginning, Tetsuo thought, and the moon is the end, but both are necessary. He reflected on how each moment in life begins small, like the light of a single candle, but over time, with patience and practice, that small light can grow into something vast, like the moon's glow. Yet, it is not the size of the light that matters, but the clarity with which we see. The moon had always been a source of peace for Tetsuo. As a child, he had often sat outside, gazing at the moon, wondering about the mysteries of the world. As he grew older, he had learned to quiet his mind, letting go of the need for answers and simply being present in the moment. Now, as a monk, he found that the moon's light represented the wisdom that comes with stillness, the clarity that arises when the mind is free from distraction. But the candle, too, had its place. It was like the beginner's mind, the starting point. The candle's light was small, fragile, and limited, just as our initial understanding of the world is. But even in its smallness, it has the power to show us the next step. It allows us to see what is in front of us, to take the first steps toward greater understanding. Without the candle's light, we would be left in the dark, unable to make progress. It was only through the candle's small flame that Tetsuo had been able to read the sutras and learn. And yet, it was through the moon's light that he could see everything beyond what was right in front of him. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, we begin with small steps. We start with what we know, with the limited light we have. But as we continue on the path, as we practice and grow, we come to realize that there is a greater light waiting for us. The small light, though necessary, is just the beginning. The vastness of the moonlight, the clarity that comes when we let go of our distractions and fears, shows us the true nature of things. It is in the silence of the night, in the stillness of the mind, that we find the true wisdom that transcends words and teachings. Tetsuo smiled to himself, feeling a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. He was no longer just a beginner, but someone who had learned to appreciate both the small and the great. The candle's light was important, but it was only a step toward the vastness of the moon's light. In the same way, the teachings of Zen were important, but they were just the beginning of a deeper understanding of the world. It was the practice of mindfulness, of being fully present in each moment, that would lead him to true clarity. As the moon rose higher in the sky, Tetsuo closed his eyes and meditated, allowing the light of the moon to fill his heart. He did not need the candle anymore. The small light had served its purpose, and now the vastness of the moonlight was all that was needed. He understood that in life we often begin with small steps, but we must never stop growing. We must continue to seek greater understanding, to move beyond the limits of our small light and embrace the infinite wisdom that is available to us in every moment. The next morning, as the first light of dawn touched the temple grounds, Tetsuo rose from his meditation, feeling refreshed and at peace. He had learned a valuable lesson that night: to embrace both the small and the great, to appreciate the beginning and the end, and to understand that true wisdom comes when we let go of our attachment to what is small and limited and open ourselves to the vastness of the present moment. He went outside to greet the day, the sun now rising to join the moon in the sky. It was a new day, a new beginning, and Tetsuo felt a deep sense of gratitude for the simple lessons that life continued to offer. Each day, like the candle and the moon, would bring its own light, small or great, fleeting or lasting, but it was up to him to be present and to see the light for what it was, a guide to deeper understanding, a path toward wisdom. And so, in the quiet peace of the morning, monk Tetsuo continued his journey, embracing the lessons of the small light and the great light, knowing that both were necessary, both were part of the path to true understanding. The candle had shown him the way, but the moon had shown him the vastness of what was beyond. And with that, Tetsuo's heart was full, ready to continue his practice in the light of both. Monk Ryo sat quietly by the pond in the temple garden. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden hue over the peaceful scene. The trees, heavy with green leaves, swayed gently in the evening breeze. The soft chirping of the birds and the rustle of the wind were the only sounds that broke the stillness. Monk Ryo had spent many years in this temple, learning the ways of Zen. And now, as he grew older, he found himself seeking peace in the quiet moments of nature. He often sat by the pond, watching the water lilies and lotus flowers float serenely on the water, their petals like delicate, sleeping creatures. That evening, as he gazed at the surface of the pond, he noticed something unusual. A single raindrop, no larger than a pinhead, had landed on a large lotus leaf. The raindrop sat there, trembling slightly, as if unsure of what to do. The lotus leaf was smooth and curved, and the raindrop clung to it, unwilling to let go. Monk Ryo watched it closely, observing the small drop as it quivered, its tiny form reflecting the last light of the day. The wind, gentle and cool, stirred the air around the pond. It whispered softly, as if speaking to the raindrop. "You do not fall," the wind seemed to say. "You return." Monk Ryo, listening to the sound of the wind, smiled gently to himself. He had often meditated in the quiet of the garden, but this moment seemed to speak to him in a deeper way. The raindrop, sitting on the leaf, was unsure, afraid to fall. It seemed to hesitate, as if it feared the unknown. Monk Ryo could relate to the raindrop. He had known moments in his life when he, too, had been uncertain, afraid to let go of what he knew, afraid to take the next step on his journey. But the wind's words were a reminder. The raindrop did not fall. It returned. The raindrop trembled again, and Monk Ryo continued to watch, waiting patiently. Slowly, as if in surrender, the raindrop slid from the leaf, falling gently toward the water below. It did not fall with fear, but with a quiet acceptance, as though it had finally realized that its journey was not an end, but a return. The raindrop joined the pond, merging with the water as if it had always belonged there, as if it had never been separate. The ripples on the surface of the pond spread out, carrying the raindrop's presence across the water. Monk Ryo sat in silence for a long time, contemplating the raindrop's journey. He realized that the raindrop was not falling into something new, but returning to where it had always come from. The raindrop had once been part of the water, part of the clouds, part of the earth. Its journey was not one of loss, but of returning to its true nature. It was not falling into the unknown, it was returning to the very source that had given it life. In Zen, there is a teaching that all things are interconnected. The raindrop's journey was a beautiful example of this truth. It was part of the cycle of nature, part of the flow of life. Nothing in nature ever truly ends, it only transforms, returning to the source and then emerging again in a different form. The raindrop's journey reminded Monk Ryo that life itself is a journey of return. We are born, we grow, we change, and then we return to the earth, just as the raindrop returns to the water. It is not a journey of loss, but of continuity, of a constant flow from one state of being to another. Monk Ryo thought about how often people fear change, how they hold on to what they know because they fear what lies beyond. The raindrop, however, had shown him that change is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. When we let go of our attachments, when we surrender to the flow of life, we too return to our true nature. Just like the raindrop, we can return to the source, to the peace and stillness that exists within all things. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting its silver light on the pond, Monk Rio closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, a peace that came from understanding that, like the raindrop, he too was on a journey of return. He was not separate from the world around him, but part of it, flowing with it, returning to it with each breath. The next day, Monk Rio sat by the pond once more, observing the stillness of the water. He had shared the story of the raindrop's journey with a few of the younger monks, and they, too, had found peace in the lesson it held. They understood that life is not about resisting change, but about flowing with it, returning to the source of all things with each passing moment. Monk Tetsuo, one of the younger monks who had been listening to Rio's teaching, approached the elder monk after his meditation. "Master," he said, "I have been thinking about the raindrop's journey. You say that it is not falling, but returning. How can I understand this in my own life? How can I stop fearing the changes that come to me?" Monk Rio smiled kindly, his eyes soft with understanding. "Tetsuo," he said gently, "just as the raindrop returns to the water, you must learn to return to yourself. When you let go of your attachments, when you stop clinging to what you think you should be, you allow yourself to return to the natural flow of life. You are not separate from it. You are part of it. When change comes, it is not something that takes you away from who you are. It is simply a part of your journey. And just as the raindrop merges with the water, so too will you merge with the flow of life." Tetsuo sat quietly, contemplating the words. "But Master," he said, "how do I let go? How do I stop holding on to what I know, to what feels safe?" Monk Rio's voice was calm and soothing. "You do not force yourself to let go, Tetsuo. You simply surrender. The raindrop does not fight its fall. It does not resist the wind. It simply allows itself to be carried to where it needs to go. You too must learn to trust in the process of life. Let go of your fear. Let go of your desire to control. When you surrender, you will find that the journey becomes much easier. You do not fall. You return." Tetsuo nodded, his heart lightened by the simplicity of the lesson. He understood now that life was not about holding on tightly, but about flowing with the changes, trusting that each step was part of a greater journey, part of a cycle that he was always a part of. As the days passed, Tetsuo began to practice letting go of his fear of change. He practiced surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that, like the raindrop, he was not falling into the unknown, but returning to where he had always belonged. With each moment of surrender, he found more peace within himself, more acceptance of the changes that came. He learned that he did not have to resist life. He simply had to flow with it. Monk Rio continued his quiet observations by the pond, knowing that the lessons of the raindrop's journey would continue to teach Tetsuo and the other monks. The raindrop's journey was not just a story, it was a living truth that could be seen in every aspect of life. It was a reminder that life is not about fighting change, but about embracing it, trusting that each step we take, no matter how small or uncertain, is part of a greater return to the source of all things. And so, in the quiet of the temple garden, Monk Rio watched the lotus leaves sway gently in the breeze, and the raindrops fall, each one returning to the water, each one finding its place in the cycle of life. Master Suki lived in a small temple nestled in the hills, surrounded by tall pine trees and flowing streams. The air was always fresh, and the peace of the temple's simple life was a balm to the soul. The temple was humble, its floors creaking with age, its walls bare except for the occasional scroll. The monks spent their days in meditation, work, and study, seeking to understand the truths of life through Zen. One day, a visiting scholar named Kiyoshi came to the temple. He had heard of Master Suki's wisdom and came seeking knowledge. He was eager to learn, his mind filled with ideas and theories, constantly searching for answers. Master Suki welcomed him warmly and invited him to stay for the evening meal. After they had eaten, the two sat together in the small tea room where Master Suki offered to pour tea for Kiyoshi. The small teapot sat between them, its steam rising in delicate wisps. Master Suki poured the tea slowly and carefully into Kiyoshi's teacup, but as he poured, the tea began to spill over the edge of the cup, spilling onto the table. The tea flowed out in a steady stream, not stopping until the entire cup was overflowing, leaving a small puddle on the table. Kiyoshi, taken aback by the spill, quickly pulled his hand back. He had been watching carefully as the tea was poured, and now the cup was full, its contents spilling over the side. Surprised, he asked, "Master, why did you spill the tea? Why did you keep pouring after the cup was full?" Master Suki, still holding the teapot, smiled gently at Kiyoshi. He did not seem surprised or disturbed by the spill. Instead, he placed the teapot down slowly, his gaze calm. "You are like this cup," Master Suki said, softly. "Until you empty yourself, I cannot fill you." Kiyoshi blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, Master?" Master Suki leaned back in his seat, his eyes gentle but full of understanding. "You come to me filled with ideas, filled with theories, filled with your own thoughts and knowledge. How can I pour wisdom into you if you are already full? Like this cup, if it is already full, there is no room for anything new. You must empty yourself of what you already know in order to receive what is waiting to be given." Kiyoshi sat silently for a long moment, reflecting on the master's words. He was a scholar, always seeking knowledge, always reading and studying, constantly filling his mind with new ideas. But now, as he sat before Master Suki, he realized that perhaps he had been so focused on filling his mind with new knowledge that he had not left space for wisdom to enter. He had been so intent on learning more that he had never stopped to consider that there might be something more important than simply adding to what he already knew. Master Suki continued, his voice soft and steady. "In Zen, we understand that true wisdom does not come from adding more thoughts or ideas. It comes from clearing away the clutter of the mind, making space for the stillness that allows the truth to enter. When you fill a cup with tea, you must first empty it, otherwise it will never hold anything new." Kiyoshi, still deep in thought, realized the truth in the master's words. He had been so busy with his studies, so consumed with his desire to know more, that he had not considered the importance of stillness. He had filled his mind with so much information that there was no room for true understanding, no room for the peace that came with letting go of all that he thought he knew. Master Suki smiled, noticing the shift in Kiyoshi's expression. "You must learn to empty yourself, Kiyoshi. Empty yourself of your expectations, of your preconceived ideas, and your attachment to knowledge. Only then can you truly receive wisdom. Only then can you truly learn." Kiyoshi sat quietly, pondering what the master had said. He had spent his life collecting knowledge, trying to learn everything he could. But now, he understood that there was more to learning than simply accumulating facts and ideas. True learning came from letting go, from emptying the mind of distractions and allowing the truth to enter naturally. The master's lesson had begun to take root in Kiyoshi's heart. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders, as though he had been carrying a heavy load of unnecessary thoughts for years. He had never thought about it this way before. The idea of emptying himself seemed strange at first, but now it felt like a kind of liberation. Master Suki continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You see, Kiyoshi, the mind is like a cup. If it is already full, there is no room for new ideas. But if you empty it, if you let go of everything you think you know, the mind becomes like an open vessel, ready to receive what the world has to offer. It is in this emptiness that true wisdom can arise." Kiyoshi nodded slowly, understanding now that true knowledge was not about filling his mind with more and more facts, but about creating space within himself to let wisdom flow in. He could now see that his constant striving for more knowledge, for more understanding, had been a barrier to true learning. It had kept him from truly seeing, from truly experiencing the present moment. Master Suki, seeing that Kiyoshi was beginning to understand, poured another cup of tea, this time much more slowly. He filled the cup with just enough tea to cover the bottom, letting the steam rise gently from the surface. "Now," the master said, "when the cup is empty, I can fill it with what is needed. Just like the mind, when it is clear, it can receive the wisdom of the moment. You do not need to force it or rush it. You only need to allow the space for it to come." Kiyoshi watched the tea as it filled the cup, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. The tea, like wisdom, was not something that could be forced. It was something that came naturally when the time was right. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lesson that Master Suki had shared with him. It was a lesson that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. For the first time in years, Kiyoshi felt the weight of his thoughts begin to lift. He no longer felt the need to constantly fill his mind with more knowledge. Instead, he understood that he could trust in the process of learning. He could allow the wisdom to come to him, rather than trying to grasp it with his hands. As the evening passed, Kiyoshi spent time in quiet meditation, reflecting on the teaching he had just received. He understood now that the key to true understanding was not in the accumulation of information, but in the ability to empty the mind, to let go of the distractions that clouded the truth. The more he could empty himself, the more he could learn. Master Suki's teachings stayed with him long after he left the temple. He realized that every moment of his life could be a lesson in emptying his mind. When he let go of his attachments, when he stopped trying to control the outcome, he made space for something greater to enter. The wisdom of the world was not something that could be forced. It was something that came naturally when he was ready to receive it. Years later, Kiyoshi returned to the temple to visit Master Suki. He was no longer the eager, overstuffed scholar who had arrived with so many questions. He had learned to empty himself, to approach life with an open mind, ready to receive whatever came his way. As he sat with Master Suki, he realized that the journey of learning had only just begun. There was always more to learn, more to discover, but he no longer felt the need to fill himself with unnecessary knowledge. He had learned that true wisdom came from letting go, from emptying the mind and making room for the present moment. Master Suki, looking at Kiyoshi, smiled with quiet approval. "You have learned well," he said softly. "But remember, you are always like this teacup. When you are full, there is no room for more. You must always make space for the new, for the unknown, for the wisdom that life has to offer. Only then can you truly receive." And with that, Kiyoshi understood. The wisdom of the empty teacup was a lesson he would carry with him forever. Monk Haruki was a young student of Master Yori. For many years, he had studied the teachings of Zen, practicing meditation and mindfulness with great dedication. He had learned many things and experienced moments of deep insight, yet he often found himself restless. There was a yearning in his heart, a desire to understand true peace, true enlightenment. He had heard many stories of how others had become enlightened, and he wondered what path they had taken, what secret had been revealed to them. One morning, as the sun rose over the temple grounds, Haruki sat with Master Yori in the garden. The air was cool, and the birds were singing, but Haruki felt a restlessness inside. He turned to his teacher and asked, "Master, how did you become enlightened? What did you do to find peace?" Master Yori, who was sitting quietly beside him, did not answer right away. He looked out toward the distant mountains, where the fog was beginning to lift. The mountains stood still, their peaks rising above the trees, their ancient stone faces unchanging. The silence between them stretched for a long moment, and Haruki's mind began to race with impatience. What could the master be thinking? Why didn't he answer? Finally, Master Yori spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I became enlightened," he said softly, "by watching the mountain not move." Haruki was puzzled. The mountain? How can watching a mountain help someone become enlightened? "It doesn't speak. It doesn't move." Master Yori smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with a wisdom that seemed to come from a deep place. "Exactly," he said. "The mountain is still. It does not move with the seasons, with the wind, or with the passing of time. It simply is. And in its stillness, it taught me patience. It taught me that peace does not come from doing, from achieving, or from changing things. It comes from being present, just as the mountain is present." Haruki sat quietly, trying to understand what Master Yori meant. He had always thought that enlightenment came from striving, from pushing forward, from achieving greater awareness. But now, as he looked at the mountains in the distance, he began to feel a deep, quiet energy, a power in the stillness itself. The mountain did nothing but stand there, yet it was majestic, timeless, and unshaken. The more he looked, the more he felt that there was something in the mountain's presence that spoke of a wisdom beyond words, beyond effort. Master Yori continued, "The mountain has no need to change. It simply is. And in this, there is eternity. It does not hurry, does not strive, does not seek. It just exists, moment by moment, day by day." Watching the mountain, I began to understand that true peace comes from being fully present with what is, not from seeking or wishing for something else. Haruki listened, his heart beginning to open to the lesson. He realized that he had spent so much of his life chasing after goals, chasing after peace, always thinking that one day, when he had done enough or understood enough, he would find the stillness he longed for. But now, Master Yori was teaching him something different. True peace was not something to be attained. It was something that already existed in every moment. It was like the mountain, it was always there, unmoving, waiting for him to simply stop and be still. The more Haruki thought about it, the more the lesson began to settle in his heart. The mountain's patience was its greatest strength. It did not force its way through the seasons or try to change the world around it. It simply allowed things to unfold in their natural time. It did not resist the winds or the storms, but simply stood firm, its presence unchanged. This patience, Master Yori had said, was the key to enlightenment. It was not the mountain's stillness that made it wise, but its acceptance of everything as it was, without resistance. Haruki felt a sense of calm begin to wash over him, as if he, too, could learn to be still, to accept life as it came, without fighting it, without rushing to the next thing. He had always tried to achieve peace, to force himself into stillness, but now he understood that stillness was not something to be achieved, it was something to be allowed, something that was always present, waiting for him to stop chasing after it and simply sit with it. That evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned to shades of pink and purple, Haruki sat outside, looking out toward the mountains. The cool breeze blew gently, and the trees rustled softly in the fading light. He felt a deep peace inside himself, a peace that had been there all along, waiting for him to stop and notice it. He understood now that peace was not something he could grasp or control. It was simply a part of life, like the mountains, steady and unchanging, always present in the background of everything else. The days passed, and Haruki continued his practice. He spent time meditating by the pond, walking quietly through the forest, and reflecting on the lessons Master Yori had shared with him. He learned to let go of his need to rush, to hurry, to constantly be seeking the next step. Instead, he learned to be patient, to sit with what was, and to allow each moment to unfold naturally. Like the mountain, he learned to be still and to embrace each moment as it came. One morning, Haruki went out to the garden, where Master Yori was working. He stood beside him, watching as the master tended to the plants with great care, pulling weeds gently and placing them in the basket beside him. After a few moments, Haruki spoke. "Master, I think I understand now. The mountain's patience taught you about eternity, but how do I practice this patience in my daily life? How do I bring it into my own actions?" Master Yori paused for a moment, looking up at Haruki with a serene expression. "You already know the answer, Haruki," he said gently. "Patience is not something you practice only in stillness. It is something you bring with you into every moment. When you work, work with patience. When you speak, speak with patience. When you walk, walk with patience. The key is to be present with each action, to allow it to unfold naturally, without rushing or forcing it. Just as the mountain stands firm through the seasons, so too can you stand firm in your life, without needing to rush ahead." Haruki nodded, feeling the weight of Master Yori's words sink deep into his heart. He realized that patience was not just a passive waiting for things to change. It was an active presence, a way of being in the world without constantly pushing or striving. It was about accepting things as they were, without trying to change them, and trusting that in time, everything would unfold as it was meant to. In the days that followed, Haruki practiced patience in every aspect of his life. He took his time when eating, when walking, when speaking to others. He no longer rushed through tasks, but approached each one with a calm, steady mind, just as the mountain stood still through the changing seasons. He found that by allowing each moment to come without resistance, he was able to experience a deep sense of peace, a peace that did not depend on circumstances or outcomes, but simply on his willingness to be present. One afternoon, as Haruki sat by the pond, watching the ripples on the water, he realized that he had begun to see the world differently. His mind, once filled with worry and impatience, had become still, like the mountain. He no longer sought after peace, for he had discovered that peace was always here, in every moment, in every breath. All he needed to do was stop and notice it, to be still and let the present moment unfold. Years passed, and Haruki became a teacher in his own right. He shared Master Yori's teachings with others, helping them to understand the deep wisdom of patience. He spoke of the mountain often, telling his students how its stillness had taught him about the eternity that exists in every moment. His students, too, began to understand the power of patience, and they learned to embrace the stillness of the mountain in their own lives. One day, as Haruki sat by the same pond, watching the ripples spread across the water, he realized that he had become like the mountain. He no longer rushed or sought after peace. He simply was, in each moment, fully present. He had learned that the path to enlightenment was not about striving or achieving, but about surrendering to the flow of life, just as the mountain surrenders to the passing seasons. In the stillness of his heart, Haruki had found the eternal peace that Master Yori had taught him so many years ago. Monk Shiro had been at the temple for many years, studying the teachings of Zen, learning to clear his mind and live in harmony with the world around him. The temple was situated on a small hill, surrounded by trees and fields. Each day, Shiro would rise early in the morning, meditate, and begin his work. The life of a monk was simple, and it was this simplicity that helped him find peace. One winter morning, as the snow fell lightly from the sky, Shiro set out for a walk through the temple grounds. The snow covered everything, soft and pristine, a perfect white blanket over the earth. The world was quiet, as it always was after a snowfall, the air crisp and still. The only sounds were the crunch of Shiro's footsteps in the snow and the soft rustling of the trees in the wind. Shiro walked slowly, his mind calm, the cold air clearing his thoughts. He felt a deep connection to the world around him, the beauty of the snow, the stillness of the morning. As he walked, he noticed the footprints his feet left behind in the fresh snow. Each step was marked clearly on the ground, a trace of his path, a reminder of his movement. He looked back at the prints, watching them slowly begin to fade under the gentle warmth of the sun, which was rising higher in the sky. Master Kyoko, who had been watching Shiro from the temple doorway, walked over to him. The older monk had always been a quiet presence, wise and patient, and had been Shiro's teacher for many years. He had guided Shiro through many moments of confusion, helping him understand the deeper truths of Zen. Master Kyoko stood beside Shiro and looked down at the footprints in the snow. "See how the footprints fade away, Shiro," he said in a gentle voice. "So too may your thoughts vanish after passing. Do not cling to them." Shiro stood still, looking at the footprints that were already beginning to melt in the warmth of the Sunday. He had noticed the same thing many times before, but hearing Master Kyoko's words brought a deeper understanding. He had always thought of his thoughts as something fixed, something that stayed with him. But now, as he watched the footprints disappear, he began to see that thoughts, like footprints in the snow, did not last. They came and went, leaving no lasting trace behind. Master Kyoko continued, "Your thoughts, like the footprints, are fleeting. They appear, leave their mark, and then vanish. When you cling to them, you weigh yourself down. But when you let them pass, you are free, like the snow that falls and melts away, leaving the world clear and fresh." Shiro nodded, his mind beginning to open to the wisdom in Master Kyoko's words. He had often been troubled by his thoughts, his worries, his regrets, his desires. He would hold on to them, replaying them in his mind over and over, unable to let them go. But now, watching the footprints in the snow disappear, he understood that holding on to his thoughts was like trying to hold on to the snowflakes as they fell. They were not meant to be kept, they were meant to be let go. The two monks stood together in silence, watching as the footprints continued to fade. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the warmth of the day melted the snow ever so slightly. The footprints became less and less distinct until they were nothing but a memory, a faint outline in the soft white ground. "Do not hold on to your thoughts, Shiro," Master Kyoko said softly, as if continuing his thoughts from earlier. "Let them come and go. When you cling to them, you create suffering. When you let them pass, you create peace." Shiro's heart lightened as he listened. He had spent so much of his life holding on to his thoughts, thinking about things he had said or done, worrying about the future, regretting the past. But now he realized that these thoughts were not permanent. They did not have to define him. Like the footprints in the snow, they would come and go, and he did not need to cling to them. Master Kyoko smiled and patted Shiro's shoulder gently. "Remember, the world is like this snow, ever-changing. You cannot control the wind, nor can you stop the sun from melting the snow. You can only walk through it, noticing each step and letting go when the time comes." Shiro stood quietly, allowing the words to sink in. He understood now that life was not about trying to control or hold on to everything. It was about moving with the flow of things, being present in each moment, and letting go when the time was right. Like the footprints in the snow, his thoughts would appear, but they did not need to stay. He did not need to carry them with him. After a long moment of reflection, Shiro took a deep breath, feeling the peace of the present moment wash over him. He could feel the crisp air in his lungs, the stillness of the world around him, and the wisdom of Master Kyoko's teachings settling deep within his heart. As the day passed, Shiro returned to his duties at the temple, but his mind was quieter than it had been before. He found that as he went about his work, he could see his thoughts come and go without clinging to them. When a worry or a desire would arise, he would acknowledge it and let it pass, like a passing cloud in the sky. His mind became clearer, and his heart felt lighter. Over the days that followed, Shiro continued to walk through the temple grounds, noticing the changing seasons and the way the world around him constantly shifted. Each day, he would remember the lesson of the footprints in the snow. He would watch his thoughts come and go, like footprints that appeared and then melted away in the warmth of the Sunday. And with each passing day, he felt more at peace, more in tune with the present moment. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky turned a brilliant orange, Shiro sat by the pond, reflecting on his journey. The water was still, and the trees cast long shadows across the ground. He thought about all the times he had held on to his thoughts, all the times he had let them weigh him down. But now he understood. Just as the footprints in the snow disappeared, so too could his thoughts. They were not permanent, and he did not need to hold on to them. Master Kyoko joined Shiro by the pond and sat down beside him. "Shiro," he said quietly, "do you see how the water reflects the sky? The water does not cling to the sky. It simply reflects what is above it. So too can you reflect the world around you without clinging to it. When you let go of your thoughts, you become like the water, clear and still, able to reflect the world as it is." Shiro nodded, feeling the deep truth in Master Kyoko's words. He understood now that by letting go of his thoughts, he was not losing anything. He was making space for the world to be as it was, without the distortions of his own desires and fears. When he let go, he became clear, like the water, able to reflect the world without interference. That night, as Shiro lay down to sleep, he felt a deep sense of peace. He no longer carried the weight of his thoughts with him. He had learned to let them go, just as the footprints in the snow had disappeared. His mind was still, and his heart was light. He had learned that the key to peace was not in holding on, but in letting go, in allowing the present moment to unfold without resistance. The next day, as Shiro walked through the temple grounds once more, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lesson he had learned. He no longer clung to his thoughts. He no longer felt the need to control or fix everything. He simply moved through the world, present in each step, allowing his thoughts to come and go like footprints in the snow. And with each passing day, Shiro's heart grew lighter and his mind grew clearer. He knew that, like the snow, like the footprints, his thoughts would pass and he could let them go. In doing so, he found the peace he had always been seeking. The lesson of the footprints in the snow had taught him to release the past, to embrace the present, and to live with a heart full of peace. Takeshi was a stonecutter who lived in a small village at the foot of a great mountain. His work was simple, but it was important. Every day, he would rise with the sun and go to the mountain, where he would cut stones with his sharp chisel and hammer. The stones were heavy, rough, and unyielding, but Takeshi knew how to shape them, turning them into blocks that were sold for building temples, homes, and other important structures. While his work was hard, Takeshi was proud of it. His hands were calloused from years of labor, but his heart was filled with satisfaction at the work he did. Yet, despite this satisfaction, there was something missing in his life. Takeshi often found himself thinking about the things he did not have, the things he longed for. He would look up at the mountain towering above him and think about the kings who lived in great palaces, surrounded by riches and power. He wondered what it would be like to have that kind of power, to command the world and have everything he desired at his fingertips. One day, as Takeshi worked, his mind wandered again to the kings he had heard about in the stories. He thought about their grand palaces, their endless wealth, and the respect everyone had for them. If only I were a king, he thought, then my life would be truly great. I would have all the power I could ever want, and I would never have to work like this again. As he continued to work, hammering away at the stone, a thought struck him. He wondered if there was a way to gain that kind of power. His hands paused in mid-air as he looked up at the sky. The thought of becoming a king filled him with longing. But then something else caught his attention. A cloud passed lazily by in the sky, drifting without a care. It moved so freely, so effortlessly across the blue expanse above. The cloud, he thought. It has no boundaries, no responsibilities. It is free to move wherever it wants. How wonderful it must be to be a cloud. It has the freedom to go anywhere, to be anywhere. For a moment, Takeshi's hammer rested on the stone and his eyes focused on the clouds. The kings had power, yes, but they were also bound by their responsibilities, their duties to their people. The clouds had no such burdens. They simply existed in their freedom, drifting from place to place. If only I were a cloud, he thought, then I would know true freedom. I would be able to travel the world without a care. The king's power means nothing compared to the freedom of the cloud. As he stood there, contemplating the freedom of the clouds, he noticed something else in the distance. The mountain loomed over him, solid and unyielding, its peak reaching far into the sky. Takeshi had always respected the mountain. It was a symbol of strength and stability. But now, as he looked at it, he thought, the mountain is so powerful, so unshakable. It has stood there for centuries, enduring through the storms, the winds, and the rains. The kings may have power, but the mountain has true strength. Nothing can move it. Nothing can stop it. Takeshi continued to work that day, but the thoughts of the kings, the clouds, and the mountain stayed with him. He imagined what it would be like to have the power of a king, the freedom of a cloud, or the stability of a mountain. What would it be like to have the strength to endure anything, he wondered. To be able to stand firm like the mountain, no matter what happens around me. As the days passed, Takeshi's desire for power, freedom, and stability grew stronger. He began to spend more time thinking about the things he lacked in his life. He wanted to be more than just a humble stone cutter. He wanted to be someone important, someone powerful. He dreamed of being a king, free like the cloud, or strong like the mountain. One evening, as he sat by the fire in his small hut, the old sage of the village came to visit him. The sage had seen Takeshi at work many times and had noticed the restlessness in the young man's heart. The sage sat with him quietly for a moment, sensing the young stone-cutter's deep longing. "Takeshi," the sage said, "I see that your heart is troubled. What is it that you desire?" Takeshi looked up, his eyes filled with longing. "I desire power," he said. "I want to be a king, with all the wealth and respect that comes with it. But I also want the freedom of the cloud, to move freely through the sky without any care. And I want the strength of the mountain, to endure anything that comes my way. I feel so small compared to all these things." The sage nodded slowly, understanding the deep longing in Takeshi's heart. "You wish for power, freedom, and strength," the sage said. "But remember this, power is fleeting, freedom is limited, strength may be tested. There is something you must understand about the things you desire." Takeshi looked at the sage, confused. "What do you mean?" The sage smiled softly and gestured toward the mountain in the distance. "The mountain," the sage said, "is strong, but even it is not immune to change. Over time, the mountain is eroded by wind, by rain, by the very forces that make it strong. Its stability is not forever. The clouds, too, are free, but they change with the wind. They may be blown away, and they may never return to the same place. As for the kings, they may have power for a time, but their power is not eternal. Even the greatest king must one day step down. The things you desire are all impermanent, Takeshi. They come and go, just like the seasons. Takeshi looked out toward the mountain, the clouds, and the distant kingdom. He had never thought of it this way before. He had longed for power, freedom, and strength. But now he began to see that these things were not permanent. The mountain, the cloud, and the kings were all subject to the passage of time, just as he was. The sage continued, "You see, Takeshi, you already have something greater than any of these things. You have the ability to shape your own life. You have the strength to endure, the freedom to choose, and the power to change your heart. The mountain may be eroded by the wind, but the earth beneath it remains. The cloud may pass, but the sky remains. And the king may lose his throne, but his actions remain. What you seek is not in power, freedom, or strength alone. It is in understanding that nothing is permanent, and that true peace comes from accepting the way things are." Takeshi sat quietly for a long time, reflecting on the sage's words. He understood now that the power he had longed for, the freedom he had dreamed of, and the strength he had admired were all fleeting. But he had something more, something that was always with him. He had the ability to shape his own life, to find peace in the impermanence of things. The next day, Takeshi returned to the mountain to continue his work. He no longer envied the kings, the clouds, or the mountains. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, carving the stone with patience and care. He understood now that power, freedom, and strength were not about holding on to things. They were about accepting the flow of life. Just as the mountain accepted the wind, the cloud accepted the sky, and the king accepted the passage of time. As Takeshi worked, he realized that he had been given the greatest gift of all, the understanding that nothing lasts forever, and that true peace comes from accepting the impermanence of all things. He smiled to himself, knowing that his work, his life, and his heart were all part of the great flow of life, just as the mountain, the cloud, and the king were. And in that understanding, he found the true power, freedom, and strength he had been seeking all along. From that day forward, Takeshi no longer sought after what he thought he lacked. He found peace in the present moment, knowing that, like the mountain being eroded by his own humble hand, everything in life was always changing, and in that change, he found the eternal truth. Monk Eiji and Monk Haru had been friends for many years, studying under the same teacher, Master Akira. Their days were filled with meditation, work, and reflection, but like many young monks, they often found themselves caught up in debates. Though they shared a deep respect for each other, their minds were different, and this often led them to differing views on the teachings they had learned. Eiji believed strongly in the importance of following the rules, while Haru was more focused on the spirit of things, believing that the heart was more important than rigid adherence to laws. One afternoon, the two monks sat by the edge of the temple grounds, watching the gentle flow of the river that ran through the village. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine, and the sound of the river provided a soft backdrop to their conversation. Eiji had just finished a long reflection on the teachings of Zen, while Haru, as usual, had his mind on other things. Eiji was the first to speak. "Haru, you know, it is important to follow the rules. Without them, how can we truly walk the path of Zen? We must adhere to the teachings, live by them, and allow them to guide us." Haru looked at Eiji with a raised eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. "But Eiji, don't you think the spirit of the teachings matters more than following the rules? The rules are important, yes, but they are just a guide. The heart behind the action is what truly matters." Eiji shook his head. "I disagree. The rules are clear. They are what guide us. If we don't follow them, how can we know we are on the right path? The The teachings are specific. We cannot simply ignore them because we feel something is more important. Haru sighed, his eyes scanning the horizon. But Eiji, what about compassion? What about understanding? Sometimes, the right action is not the one that follows the letter of the law, but the one that follows the spirit of it. The debate continued, growing more intense with each passing moment. Eiji felt strongly that there was a right way and a wrong way, that the rules were clear, and that to stray from them was to stray from Zen itself. Haru, on the other hand, believed that the true essence of Zen was found in understanding and compassion, not in rigid rules. He argued that the heart's intention was far more important than strict adherence to any set of teachings. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the world in a golden light, Master Akira walked over to where the two monks sat. His face was calm, his eyes serene, as always. He had been quietly observing the conversation from a distance, knowing that it was time to offer a lesson. Master Akira had always been a patient teacher, guiding his students through their struggles with quiet wisdom. He stood for a moment, taking in the scene before speaking. "Eiji, Haru," Master Akira said gently. "Why do you argue so fiercely?" The two monks looked up at their teacher, surprised by his sudden appearance. They were both quiet for a moment, unsure how to respond. Finally, Eiji spoke, his voice steady but filled with the passion of his belief. "Master, I believe that we must follow the rules. They are clear and unchanging. To stray from them is to lose our way." Haru, always ready to express his thoughts, added, "Master, I believe that the heart's intention is what matters most. The rules are important, but we must not become prisoners to them. Compassion and understanding must guide our actions." Master Akira nodded slowly, his eyes full of understanding. He could see the struggle in both of them, the clash of ideas, the way they each felt strongly about their beliefs. "I see," he said softly. "Both of you are right, and both of you are mistaken." The two monks looked at each other, puzzled. They had expected their teacher to take sides, but instead, he seemed to be pointing out the limitations in both of their views. "Let me show you something," Master Akira said, turning toward the bridge that spanned the river. "Come with me." Eiji and Haru followed their teacher in silence as they walked toward the bridge. The bridge was old but sturdy, with wooden planks worn smooth by years of use. The river below was calm, its waters flowing gently past, reflecting the colors of the sky. Master Akira paused at the center of the bridge, standing still for a moment, gazing out at the water. "Do you see the river?" he asked. "Yes," Eiji replied. "The water flows calmly. It is steady, unchanging." Master Akira nodded. "And the bridge?" he asked, looking at the wooden beams that supported them. "Is it not also steady, unchanging, and solid?" "Yes, Master," Haru said. "The bridge is sturdy, built to withstand the flow of the river." Master Akira turned to face them, his eyes sharp yet kind. "Now, let me show you something," he said. "When the breath leaves, who is right?" The two monks stood in confusion. They did not understand the question. Master Akira smiled gently and took a deep breath. He exhaled slowly, watching the air leave his body, before speaking again. "The breath is like the rules. It is constant, it is necessary, but it is not the only thing that matters. When the breath leaves, who is right?" Eiji and Haru were silent, thinking carefully about their teacher's words. The question seemed to hold a deeper meaning, one they could not yet grasp. Master Akira continued, "Just as the breath leaves and returns, so too do your thoughts. The rules are like the breath, they guide you. They are part of the path, but they are not the end of the path. When you cling to the breath, when you cling to the rules, you miss the flow of life, the space between the breaths. The bridge is sturdy, but it is also empty beneath your feet. The water flows beneath, changing, never the same. The bridge stands firm, yet it does not try to hold back the river. It simply supports it. Eiji and Haru stood still, considering the words of their teacher. Master Akira's message was becoming clearer. The rules were like the bridge. They were necessary, they provided structure and guidance, but they were not the entire path. The flow of life, the heart's intention, the space between the rules, these were just as important. Master Akira smiled at them, as though reading their thoughts. "Do you see now?" he asked. "When the breath leaves, the mind wants to hold on, to grasp. But just as the river flows, so must your thoughts. They will come, they will go, and you must not hold on to them. The rules are important, yes, but they are only one part of the path. The heart, the intention, the presence in each moment, these are what truly guide you." Eiji and Haru looked at each other, their faces softening with understanding. The debate between them had been about right and wrong, about rules and freedom. But Master Akira had shown them that it was not about choosing one over the other. It was about balance, about understanding that the rules are like the bridge, but the flow of life, the river, the breath, the space between is just as important. The two could coexist, but they must not be forced. "Master," Eiji said softly, "I now see. The rules are like the bridge, but the heart, the flow of life, is what moves beneath it. I must not cling to the rules as if they are all that matter. I must also learn to move with the flow of life." Haru nodded, smiling. "And I see that the rules are not to be abandoned. They provide structure, but they must not become rigid. The heart's intention is what gives life meaning." Master Akira smiled and nodded in approval. "Well done. Now, let us cross the bridge together." The three monks walked across the bridge in silence, each of them feeling a deeper understanding of the balance between structure and flow. As they reached the other side, Monk Eiji and Monk Haru both felt lighter in their hearts. Their debate settled not by an answer, but by the realization that both sides were part of the same whole. From that day on, Eiji and Haru practiced together, their hearts more open to the balance between the rules and the flow of life. They no longer argued, for they understood that both were necessary, both were part of the same path. Just as the bridge held the river, the rules held the heart's intention, but both must flow together, side by side. Master Tatsu and his disciple Yumi set out early that morning for a walk through the temple grounds. The air was damp, and the heavy fog had rolled in overnight, shrouding the landscape in a soft, thick mist. The world around them felt muted and distant, as if everything had been softened by the fog. It was a strange and quiet morning, where everything seemed to blend together, the sky, the trees, the ground, into one unbroken mass of grey. As they walked, Yumi's eyes darted from side to side, trying to see through the dense mist, but it was impossible. The path ahead was unclear. She could only make out the faintest outlines of the trees and the distant hills. The fog seemed endless, and with each step, it became harder to tell if they were moving forward or merely walking in circles. Master Tatsu, always calm and composed, carried a simple lantern in his hand. The lantern was small, nothing special, but the light it cast was warm and soft. It didn't shine far into the mist, but it provided enough light for each step they took. Yumi, feeling a little uneasy in the thick fog, looked at her master and asked, "Master, how will we find our way through this? The fog is so thick. We can hardly see anything." Master Tatsu smiled gently, as he always did when Yumi asked questions. He had known her for many years, watching her grow from an eager young student into someone who still sought answers, but with a deeper understanding of life's mysteries. He had always appreciated her curiosity, her desire to understand the world. Master Tatsu held up the lantern and, with his usual quiet voice, said, "It does not pierce the mist. It simply lights the next step." Yumi furrowed her brow, confused by his answer. "But Master," she said, "the fog is so thick. How can a small lantern help us find our way? Shouldn't we be able to see farther? Shouldn't we know where we are going?" Master Tatsu continued walking, the lantern casting a small, flickering light on the path ahead. "The lantern does not show the entire path," he said, his voice steady and calm. "It only shows the next step, and that is enough. You do not need to see the whole journey. You only need to take the next step, and the one after that. The rest will come when it is time." Yumi paused for a moment, taking in her master's words. She had spent many years studying with him, and yet there were still moments when his teachings felt like a deep well, full of wisdom she had only begun to touch. "But, Master," she asked, "what if we walk in the wrong direction? What if the next step leads us away from where we need to go?" Master Tatsu turned his head and looked at her with a kind, knowing expression. "Yumi," he said, "you will never know the entire path, and the path is not the goal. The goal is to walk with awareness, to be present in each moment. The fog, like life, may cloud your vision. But the lantern is not meant to show you the entire journey. It is meant to show you the next step, and that is all you need." Yumi stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She understood, but only in the quietest, most subtle way. She had always been someone who wanted to know everything in advance. She had often found herself planning, calculating, making sure every detail was figured out. The idea of moving forward without knowing what lay ahead felt uncomfortable. But now, as she stood in the mist, she began to see the wisdom in Master Tatsu's words. She looked down at the lantern and saw its warm glow. It didn't shine far, but it illuminated the ground beneath her feet. She could see the path directly ahead, and for the first time, she realized that was all she needed. The lantern wasn't trying to show her the whole world, it was showing her the next step. And that was enough. Master Tatsu began to walk again, the lantern still casting its soft light. Yumi followed, her mind quieter, now her feet moving more steadily. The fog still surrounded them, thick and impenetrable, but she didn't feel lost anymore. With each step, she felt the weight of uncertainty lift. She understood that life, like the path ahead, could not be fully understood or predicted. The only thing she could control was the next step, and that was enough. As they walked deeper into the mist, Yumi began to notice things she hadn't seen before. The sound of the birds in the trees, the rustle of the leaves underfoot, the coolness of the air. It was as though the world had become more alive, more present, the longer she allowed herself to simply walk, without trying to control everything around her. She could feel the flow of life in each step, in each breath, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace with not knowing. After a while, the fog began to thin, just a little. The path ahead became clearer, and the distant trees began to take shape. Yumi noticed that the fog hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer seemed so overwhelming. The lantern's light had shown her the way through the mist, step by step, and with each step, the world began to reveal itself more and more. She no longer needed to see everything ahead. The journey was unfolding, and she could trust it. When they finally reached the end of the path and stepped out from under the thick fog, the world around them was bathed in sunlight. The trees stood tall, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, and the sky above was clear. Yumi took a deep breath, feeling the freshness of the air. She felt lighter, more connected to everything around her. Master Tatsu stopped and turned to face her. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes sparkled with quiet understanding. Yumi, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, smiled. "Master," she said softly, "I understand now. It's not about seeing the whole path. It's about taking the next step, trusting that each step will lead me where I need to go." Master Tatsu nodded. "Yes, Yumi. Life is much like the fog. It clouds your vision, but if you wait and move with awareness, the path will gradually reveal itself. The lantern does not show you the whole journey, but it shows you the next step. That is enough. It is always enough. Yumi looked at the lantern in Master Tatsu's hand, which now seemed even smaller, even more humble. It had no power to pierce the entire mist, but it had guided them through it, step by step. She realized that in her own life, she had often been overwhelmed by the uncertainty of the future, trying to see everything at once. But now, she understood that it wasn't necessary. She only needed to focus on the next step, trust that the way would unfold, and remain present in each moment. Master Tatsu smiled and began to walk again, the lantern still in his hand, its light still soft but steady. Yumi followed, her mind clearer than it had been before. She didn't need to know everything. She didn't need to control everything. She could walk forward with trust, with the lantern's light showing her the next step. That was all that mattered. From that day forward, whenever Yumi faced uncertainty, she would think back to that morning in the fog. She would remember how the lantern did not try to pierce the mist, but simply lit the next step. In life, there would always be uncertainty, always be fog. But as long as she focused on the next step, as long as she moved with awareness and trust, she would find her way. Zen Master Keiko lived in a small temple by the edge of a tranquil pond. The temple was simple, with wooden walls and paper windows. The garden surrounding it was well kept, with flowers and shrubs that swayed gently in the wind. The pond was the heart of the temple, its still waters reflecting the sky above. Every morning, Master Keiko would sit beside the pond, looking out over its surface as the mist lifted from the water and the sun slowly warmed the day. One day, Kaito, a young monk who had just arrived at the temple, sat beside Master Keiko. He had been learning the ways of Zen for some time, but there was still much he did not understand. He had heard that Master Keiko was a wise teacher, and he had come seeking wisdom and clarity. As they sat together in silence, Kaito noticed Master Keiko was cleaning the pond, scooping out the leaves and debris that had gathered on the surface. The water was calm, but the leaves and dirt clouded the clarity of the reflection. With great care, Master Keiko moved the small net through the water, clearing away what was no longer needed. Kaito watched, puzzled. "Master," Kaito asked after a while, "why do you clean the pond every day? The water always becomes dirty again. Isn't it a waste of time to keep cleaning it?" Master Keiko smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "Kaito," he said gently, "the pond teaches us something very important. When the water is clear, the sky reflects. But when the water is muddy, the sky cannot be seen clearly. You see, when we clear the water, we create a space for the sky to reflect in it. And when the mind is clear, the world reflects back to us just as it truly is." Kaito sat still for a moment, his mind turning over Master Keiko's words. He looked at the pond again, the surface shimmering in the light, now clearer than before. He could see the reflection of the trees, the sky, and the clouds floating gently above. "So," Kaito said, "you are cleaning the pond so the reflection of the sky can be seen clearly, just as we must clear our minds to see the world clearly." Master Keiko nodded. "Exactly. The pond is like the mind. When the surface is disturbed, we cannot see the truth. The reflections are clouded. But when we clear the distractions, the mind becomes like clear water, and the truth of the world reflects back to us. It is the same with our thoughts. When we are filled with worries, desires, and distractions, we cannot see the world as it truly is. But when we clear our minds of these things, we can see clearly." Kaito looked down at the pond, realizing that Master Keiko was teaching him something deeper than just the importance of a clean pond. It wasn't just about clearing away leaves or dirt. It was about the inner state of the mind. When the mind was clouded by emotions, thoughts, and attachments, it was like looking at a muddy pond, unable to see the true nature of things. But when the mind was clear, like the still water of the pond, everything around him became clearer, more vivid, more true. As Kaito thought about this, he asked, "Master, how do we clear the mind? How do we remove the distractions and the muddy thoughts that cloud our vision?" Master Keiko looked at Kaito, his eyes full of kindness. "We clear the mind, Kaito, by practicing stillness. Meditation, mindfulness, and awareness are the tools we use to bring the mind into clarity. But just as it takes time to clean the pond, it takes time and patience to clear the mind. It is not something that happens in a moment. It is a continuous practice, a gentle effort." Kaito nodded slowly, understanding that the process of clearing the mind was not something that could be rushed. It would require patience, effort, and persistence, just like cleaning the pond each day. The mind, like the water, would always gather distractions and clutter, but with continued practice, he could clear those distractions and come to a place of stillness where the world could reflect clearly. Master Keiko continued, "You do not force the mind to be still. You simply allow it to settle. Just as the pond settles after the wind, your mind will settle if you allow it to. The key is in not reacting to the distractions, not becoming caught up in them. When a leaf falls into the pond, we do not try to hold it in place. We simply remove it. In the same way, when a thought arises in the mind, we do not chase it, but let it pass." Kaito thought about this for a long time. He had often struggled with his thoughts, trying to force them to go away, trying to control them. But Master Keiko was teaching him a different approach. Instead of fighting the thoughts, he could simply let them come and go, like leaves falling on the water. This approach seemed simpler, more natural. "I see now, Master," Kaito said softly. "When we let the thoughts come and go, like leaves on the surface of the pond, we create space for clarity. The mind becomes still, just as the water becomes clear when the leaves are removed." Master Keiko smiled, his face lighting up with quiet approval. "Yes, Kaito. And just as the water reflects the sky, the mind reflects the world. When your mind is clear, you will see the world as it truly is, without the distortion of your thoughts and desires. You will see things as they are, not as you wish them to be." Kaito stood up and walked over to the edge of the pond. He looked down at the water, now clear and calm. The reflection of the sky above was vivid and pure. He could see the trees standing tall beside the pond, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. He understood now what Master Keiko had meant. The mind, like the pond, was capable of reflecting the world with clarity, but only when it was clear of distractions and clutter. Master Keiko joined him by the pond, standing quietly beside him. The reflection of the sky in the pond is like the clarity of the mind. It is not something you force or create. It is simply a result of the mind's natural state when it is clear of distractions. The clearer the mind, the clearer the world will appear to you. Kaito nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. He realized that his restlessness, his constant striving, had been like the leaves and debris on the pond's surface, blocking the clarity of the world. But now, with Master Keiko's teachings, he understood that peace came from stillness, from clearing away the distractions and letting the mind settle naturally. In this stillness, the world would reflect itself in its true form. Master Keiko looked at Kaito, his expression warm and kind. "Remember, Kaito, the pond is cleaned every day. The mind, too, must be cleaned each day. It is a continuous practice, a habit of stillness. Do not expect perfection. Just as the pond will always gather leaves, your mind will always gather thoughts. But with practice, you will learn to clear them, and in that clearing, the world will appear with clarity." Kaito smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He understood that this practice, like cleaning the pond, was something he would need to do each day. It wasn't a one-time effort, but a continuous process of clearing the distractions and coming back to stillness. In that stillness, he would find peace and clarity, just as the pond found its reflection when the water was clear. In the days that followed, Kaito practiced Master Keiko's teachings. Each morning, he would sit beside the pond, quietly watching the water and clearing his mind of distractions. He would meditate, letting each thought come and go, without clinging to any of them. Over time, he found that the more he practiced stillness, the clearer his mind became. The world, too, appeared clearer, as if a fog had lifted, revealing its true beauty. One day, after many months of practice, Kaito sat by the pond, watching the reflection of the sky. The water was still, its surface smooth and calm. He felt a deep sense of peace within himself, knowing that he had learned to clear his mind, to let go of distractions, and to simply be present in each moment. Master Keiko approached and stood beside him. He looked down at the water, the clear reflection of the sky in its surface. "The pond is clear today," Master Keiko said softly, "and so is your mind. You have learned to let go of the distractions, to clear the water so the reflection can be seen." Kaito smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for his teacher. "Thank you, Master. I understand now. When the mind is clear, the world reflects itself with clarity, and when we clear the distractions, we allow the true nature of things to reveal itself." Master Keiko nodded. "Yes, Kaito, and remember, this practice is not something you finish. It is something you continue, each day. Just as the pond is cleaned every day, so too must the mind be cleared. The world will always reflect what is in your mind. Keep it clear, and the world will show you its true nature." Kaito stood up, bowing deeply to his teacher. He understood now that the clarity he sought was not something to chase or force. It was something to allow, to clear space for, like cleaning the pond, to reveal the reflection of the sky. In the stillness, in the clarity, he would find peace. And so, Kaito continued his practice, cleaning the pond of his mind each day, finding peace in the stillness, and allowing the world to reflect itself with clarity. Monk Jun had spent many years in the quiet temple by the river. He had studied the teachings of Zen, practicing meditation, mindfulness, and the simplicity of living in the moment. The temple itself was nestled in a peaceful valley, surrounded by tall trees, and the soft sounds of the river's flow created a sense of calm that filled Jun's heart with peace. Each day, he would rise early, meditate by the water, and contemplate the mysteries of life. One morning, as the sun was rising and the air was cool, Monk Jun walked down to the riverbank, where the soft morning mist still clung to the surface of the water. The river was calm, and the birds in the trees sang gently, as if welcoming the new day. As Jun sat by the river, he noticed something delicate and light floating on the water, a small feather. It drifted effortlessly along the current, moving with the flow, without resistance. Jun watched the feather for a long time, captivated by its quiet journey. It was then that a thought began to form in his mind, one that he had not fully understood before. He had been studying Zen for many years, but there was something about the feather on the water that felt like a deep teaching, a lesson he was finally beginning to grasp. As he sat there, watching the feather drift, he realized that enlightenment was not about pushing against life's current. It was about learning to float upon it, to allow life to move you without resistance. The feather did not struggle against the current, it simply moved with it, allowing the river to guide it. Jun realized that this was a perfect metaphor for life. So often, people tried to control their lives, to force things to happen the way they wanted them to. But the feather, with its gentle, unhurried movement, showed him that true peace came from letting go of that control, from surrendering to the flow of life, and trusting that everything would unfold as it should. Jun closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the stillness of the morning to settle in his heart. He had spent much of his life struggling, trying to understand everything, trying to force his mind to reach a certain point of clarity. But now, he saw that true clarity did not come from striving. It came from letting go, from allowing life to carry him forward, just as the river carried the feather. As the feather drifted further down the river, Jun watched it for a while longer, feeling a deep sense of peace fill his heart. He understood now that life's current would always move him. Sometimes it might seem slow, other times fast, but the key was not to resist it. Resistance only caused suffering. When he allowed himself to move with life, to float like the feather on the water, he would find peace. Later that day, as monk Jun was working in the temple garden, his young disciple, Akira, came to him, eager to learn. Akira had been struggling with his practice, often feeling frustrated by his inability to control his thoughts and emotions. He had been trying to force himself into a state of calm, but the harder he tried, the more restless he became. "Master," Akira asked, "why is it so difficult to find peace? I try to clear my mind, but the thoughts always come rushing back. I try to be still, but my mind won't stop moving. Why can't I just let go?" Jun looked at Akira with kind eyes, understanding the frustration in his voice. "Akira," he said softly, "finding peace is not about forcing it. It is not about fighting against the flow of life. True peace comes when you learn to float with it, to allow life to move you without resistance. Just like the feather on the water, you must learn to float with the current, not against it." Akira looked at his master, puzzled. "But master, if I don't control my thoughts, how will I ever find peace?" Jun smiled and pointed to the river nearby. "Look at the water, Akira," he said. "Do you see how it flows, how it moves with ease, how it does not try to fight the obstacles in its path? The river simply flows, and wherever it goes, it finds its way. The feather, too, floats on the water, carried by the current without struggle." Akira looked out at the river, watching the flow of water as it moved steadily downstream. He could see that the river was not fighting against anything. It simply moved, allowing the current to guide it. The rocks and branches in the water did not stop it. The river simply flowed around them, continuing on its journey. "Just like the river," Yun continued, "you must learn to let go of your resistance. When you try to force peace, you are like a rock in the river, blocking the flow. But when you let go, when you stop struggling, you become like the feather, floating with the current, allowing life to guide you." Akira was silent for a moment, taking in his master's words. "But master," he asked, "how do I stop resisting? How do I let go of the struggle?" Jun looked at him with a gentle smile. "You do not need to stop your thoughts or control them. When they come, acknowledge them, but do not cling to them. Just as the feather floats on the surface of the water, let your thoughts float by without holding on to them. The more you try to control them, the more you become entangled in them. But when you let them pass, like the water flowing around the rocks, you find peace." Akira nodded slowly, beginning to understand. He had always tried to force himself to clear his mind, to make his thoughts stop, but he had never realized that the key was not in fighting against the thoughts, but in allowing them to come and go without attachment. Just like the feather on the water, he needed to learn to float with the current of his thoughts, instead of struggling against them. The next day, Akira sat by the river, watching the water flow gently by. He closed his eyes and tried to let go of his thoughts, allowing them to drift away like the leaves on the surface of the water. At first, it was difficult. His mind was filled with worries, with desires, with the constant chatter of daily life. But slowly, as he focused on the sound of the water, he began to feel his thoughts settle. They did not disappear completely, but they no longer held him captive. He could feel the peace of the river, the stillness that came from letting go of the struggle. As he continued to practice, Akira found that he could sit quietly for longer periods of time. His thoughts still came, but they no longer controlled him. He could simply let them pass, like leaves drifting down the river. And in that letting go, he found a deep peace that he had never experienced before. One morning, after many days of practice, Akira sat with Master Jun by the river, feeling a sense of calm that he had never known. He looked at his master and said, "Master, I understand now. The key is not to force peace, but to let go of the struggle. Like the feather, I must learn to float with life's current, not fight against it." Yun smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "Yes, Akira, you have learned well. True peace comes from letting go, from accepting the flow of life as it is, without resistance. The feather on the water does not try to control the current. It simply floats, trusting the movement of the water. You too can trust the flow of life, knowing that you are always being carried toward peace." Akira bowed deeply, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for his master's guidance. "Thank you, Master. I will remember this lesson every day. I will learn to float with life, to let go of my struggles and accept the flow of the present moment." As the days passed, Akira continued to practice, learning to let go of his resistance and embrace the present moment. He found peace in the stillness of the river, in the quiet flow of life that moved around him. He realized that enlightenment was not about striving or struggling, but about learning to float with the current of life, trusting that each moment would carry him where he needed to go. And so, with each day, Akira's heart grew lighter, his mind clearer, and his spirit more at peace. Like the feather on the river, he learned to move with the flow of life, finding peace in the acceptance of what was, rather than in the struggle for what could be. In that peace, he found the true essence of Zen. Monk Daigo and Monk Ichiro were both devoted students of Master Kiyomi, known for his wisdom and his gentle teachings on Zen. Both monks had been learning the ways of Zen for many years, but as often happens in a life of study and reflection, they sometimes found themselves caught in disagreements. Each monk had a strong will, and each had a deep desire to understand life's mysteries. But their minds were often at odds, particularly when it came to how the world worked. One afternoon, after completing their morning tasks, Daigo and Ichiro sat under the old oak tree in the temple garden. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm light over the temple grounds. The air was still, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves. Both monks sat in quiet reflection, but after a while they began to talk. "I'm telling you, Ichiro," Daigo said, his voice firm, "it is the wind that moves the banner. The wind blows, and the banner flutters in response. That is how the movement happens. It is clear." Ichiro shook his head slowly. "No, Daigo, it is not the wind. It is the banner that moves. The banner is what is being moved by the wind. The wind itself does not move. It is simply there, pushing the banner. The banner is what responds." The two monks stared at each other, both convinced of their own point of view. The argument, at first quiet, grew more heated as both monks became more passionate. They were determined to prove that their understanding of the situation was correct. "The wind moves the banner," Daigo insisted. "No, it's the banner that moves," Ichiro countered, his tone becoming more urgent. The two monks argued for what seemed like hours, each growing more animated, but neither willing to back down. They discussed every possible angle of the question, each trying to find a way to prove their point. But in the end, neither was satisfied. Finally, their teacher, Master Kiyomi, who had been quietly observing from a distance, walked over to them. His expression was calm, his eyes full of understanding. He had seen many such arguments in his time and knew that often the disagreement was not about the truth, but about the minds of those involved. "Monks Daigo and Ichiro," Master Kiyomi said softly, What is this argument about? Both monks turned to their teacher, a little embarrassed but still holding tightly to their positions. Master, Daigo said, we were discussing the movement of the banner. Ichiro believes it is the banner that moves, and I believe it is the wind. Master Kiyomi smiled, but there was a twinkle of amusement in his eyes. I see, he said, and why do you both insist that you are right? Daigo and Ichiro looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. After a moment, Daigo spoke again. Master, I believe that it is the wind that causes the movement. The banner simply reacts to the wind. It is the force of the wind that moves the banner. Ichiro nodded in agreement, but his answer was different. No, Master, it is the banner that moves. The wind is simply there, but it is the banner that is caught by it and is made to move. Master Kiyomi listened to both of their explanations, his face still calm. You both argue as though you are speaking of something solid, something that can be grasped. But you miss the most important point. Let me show you something. Master Kiyomi walked to the edge of the garden where a large banner was hanging from a pole. The banner, a simple piece of cloth, flapped gently in the breeze. The wind was light, but enough to make the banner move. Master Kiyomi stood beside the banner for a moment, watching the fabric flutter in the wind. Then, without a word, he reached down and took the banner from the pole. He held it in his hands, still and unmoving. Now, Master Kiyomi said, his voice steady, look at the banner. The two monks watched closely. The banner was still now, unmoving in Master Kiyomi's hands. Do you see? The master continued. When the banner is still in my hands, it moves no more. And when it is caught in the wind, it moves with the wind. But neither the wind nor the banner is the true cause of the movement. It is the mind that moves. Daigo and Ichiro exchanged confused glances. The mind? Daigo asked. Master, we are speaking of the wind and the banner. How can the mind be the cause of movement? Master Kiyomi smiled. You see, the wind and the banner are simply conditions, external forces. But the true cause of the movement is how you perceive it. Your mind creates the experience. When you watch the wind and the banner, you see one moving, and you judge that it is the wind or the banner that causes the movement. But what if I told you that it is your mind that moves, and that it is this movement in your mind that makes you see the wind or the banner as the source of the motion? The two monks sat quietly, their minds beginning to open to the possibility that their teacher's words carried a deeper meaning. Master, Ichiro said slowly, are you saying that the movement we see is not real, but only a reflection of our minds? Master Kiyomi nodded. Yes, Ichiro, the movement is real in one sense, but it is shaped by your mind. When your mind is calm and clear, you see the world clearly, just as it is. But when your mind is agitated, when you cling to your opinions, you see the world in a distorted way. The wind, the banner, they are simply conditions. The mind is what creates the experience of movement. Without the mind, there would be no movement. Daigo's brow furrowed in thought. So, you are saying that our minds are the true source of everything we experience? Master Kiyomi smiled gently. Yes. The mind shapes your perception of the world. When you are angry, you see the world through anger. When you are fearful, you see the world through fear. When you are calm, the world appears calm. But the world itself does not change. It is your mind that creates the experience. The two monks sat in silence for a while, contemplating Master Kiyomi's words. They had always thought that the world was separate from their minds, that things were the way they were, independent of how they thought about them. But now they were beginning to see that everything they experienced was shaped by their own perceptions, by their own minds. Finally, Monk Daigo spoke. Master, you are telling us that when we argue, it is not the wind or the banner, that moves. It is our own minds creating the experience of movement. Master Kiyomi nodded. Yes, Daigo. The wind and the banner are just conditions. Your mind creates the experience. And when you stop clinging to your beliefs, when you stop grasping at the idea of being right, you will see that the movement is not in the wind or the banner, but in your own mind. The mind moves, and the rest follows. Monk Ichiro smiled, feeling the truth of Master Kiyomi's words sink into his heart. I understand now, Master. When I stop trying to control the world, when I stop insisting that I know the right answer, I can see that the movement comes from within. It is my mind that shapes everything I experience. Master Kiyomi smiled back at his students, pleased with their understanding. Yes, Ichiro, the mind is the source. When you let go of your attachments, when you stop clinging to your opinions, you will find that the world becomes still, and in that stillness, you will find peace. As the sun began to set and the air grew cooler, Master Kiyomi turned to leave the garden, his disciples following behind him. They walked in silence, their hearts full of the wisdom they had received. The argument over the wind and the banner had taught them a deeper truth, that it was not the world that caused their experiences, but their own minds. And by understanding this, they could find peace in any situation, as the mind's movement no longer needed to control their perception of reality. That night, as the moon rose high above the temple, Monk Daigo and Monk Ichiro sat together in meditation, their minds clear and still. They no longer argued about what caused the movement of the banner or the wind. They had learned that the true source of all movement lay within their own minds, and by letting go of their attachments, they could find peace. And as the quiet of the night surrounded them, they realized that the greatest movement of all was not the wind or the banner, but the stillness that came when the mind ceased to grasp at the world. In that stillness, they found the peace that they had been seeking all along. Master Soji lived in a small temple nestled in the hills, where the trees whispered in the wind and the air was always still and cool. The temple was simple wooden beams, paper walls, and a small garden where flowers bloomed in the spring and autumn leaves fell softly in the fall. There was a peacefulness in the air, a calm that seemed to emanate from the temple itself. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, and the world outside seemed far away. Monk Aiko, a young student of Master Soji, had been living in the temple for several years. Though Aiko had learned much from Master Soji, there was still a deep yearning inside her. She longed for a deeper understanding of Zen and the nature of true peace. She often found herself looking at the statue of Buddha in the temple hall, a serene figure sitting with its hands resting in its lap, eyes half closed, its expression peaceful and still. It was a statue that had always fascinated Aiko. The Buddha's calmness seemed so perfect, so unshakable, but one thing bothered Aiko. Every time she looked at the statue, she felt as though something was missing. The Buddha was always asleep, and yet the Buddha was also always awake. How could both be true at once? One morning, as the sun rose high over the hills, Aiko sat quietly in front of the statue of Buddha, gazing at it intently. She was deep in thought, her mind swirling with questions. Why did the Buddha look so calm and peaceful? What did his stillness mean? And why was he always asleep, yet awake at the same time? She had pondered these questions many times, but she had never found an answer that satisfied her. Master Soji, noticing Aiko sitting in front of the statue, quietly approached her. He had seen the questioning look in her eyes many times before. Soji knew that Aiko was seeking something more, a deeper understanding that could not be found simply by studying the teachings. Aiko, Master Soji said gently, what troubles you today? Aiko looked up at her teacher, her face filled with the same question she had been asking herself for so long. Master, I don't understand. Every time I look at the statue of Buddha, I see a figure that is always calm, always peaceful. But the Buddha is always asleep. Why is he asleep? How can he be both asleep and awake at the same time? Master Soji smiled softly, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. He sat down next to Aiko, his posture relaxed and steady. He looked at the statue of Buddha, his gaze soft and full of warmth. "Aiko," he said, "the statue of Buddha is not asleep in the way you think. He is resting, but he is also awake, for he has learned to rest within the world." Aiko's eyes widened in confusion. "Rest within the world? But Master, isn't the world filled with distractions? How can the Buddha be both asleep and awake at the same time?" Master Soji took a slow, deep breath. "The Buddha's sleep is not a sleep of the body, it is a sleep of the mind. The Buddha rests in the world, but he is not disturbed by it. He has learned to be still, to be at peace, even in the midst of all that happens around him." Aiko listened carefully, trying to understand her teacher's words. Master Soji continued, "You see, Aiko, many people think that peace comes from being free of the world. They think that in order to find peace, they must escape the world, leave behind their struggles, and retreat into solitude. But the Buddha teaches us something different. He teaches us that peace is found not in escaping the world, but in learning to rest within it." Aiko's mind began to turn over the idea. "But how is that possible, Master? How can we rest in the world without being disturbed by it?" Master Soji looked at the statue of Buddha again, his expression calm. "The Buddha is always at peace because he has learned to be present with whatever comes. He does not run from the world, nor does he cling to it. He simply allows it to be. When you learn to rest in the present moment, you will find peace in everything. The world will still move, the winds will still blow, but you will no longer be disturbed by it. You will be at peace with it." Aiko sat silently for a moment, feeling the weight of her teacher's words. "So, you are saying that the Buddha's sleep is not about avoiding the world, but about being at peace with it?" Master Soji nodded. "Yes, Aiko. The Buddha does not try to control the world, nor does he fight against it. He simply allows the world to be as it is, while remaining centered and still within himself. He has learned to rest within the world, and in doing so, he remains awake to the truth of all things." Aiko closed her eyes, letting the words settle in her heart. She thought about her own life, how often she had tried to control her circumstances, how often she had fought against the challenges she faced. She had always believed that peace meant escaping the world, avoiding the things that disturbed her. But now, she saw that peace was not about running away. It was about being still, being present, no matter what the world brought. "Master," Aiko said quietly, "I think I understand now. The Buddha's rest is not about escaping the world. It's about accepting the world as it is, without resistance. And in that acceptance, he finds peace." Master Soji smiled. "Exactly. The Buddha's stillness is not the stillness of avoiding, but the stillness of acceptance. When you can rest in the world, when you can let go of your attachment to things and simply be present with whatever is, you will find peace." Aiko felt a sense of calm wash over her as she understood the depth of Master Soji's teachings. She realized that her search for peace had been filled with striving and resistance. She had always thought that peace meant being free of struggle, free of the world's chaos. But now she saw that true peace came from within, from the ability to rest in the world without being disturbed by it. From that day forward, Aiko practiced the lesson her master had taught her. She learned to be still, to be at peace with the world, even as it moved around her. The struggles she had once resisted no longer troubled her as much. She began to see that, just as the Buddha remained calm in his rest, she too could find rest in the world, no matter what came her way. Master Soji continued to teach Aiko, guiding her deeper into the practice of mindfulness and presence. As she learned to rest in the world, she became more aware of the beauty around her, the gentle rustle of the leaves, the sound of the wind, the stillness of the temple grounds. Each moment became an opportunity to practice peace, to rest in the present moment. Years passed, and Aiko grew in her practice, becoming a teacher in her own right. She shared Master Soji's teachings with others, helping them understand that peace was not something to be sought in the future or found in solitude. It was found in the present, in the ability to rest within the world, just as the Buddha rested. One day, as Aiko sat by the pond, reflecting on her journey, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for her teacher's wisdom. She had learned that enlightenment was not about avoiding life's struggles, but about accepting them with a calm and open heart. The Buddha's rest had shown her that true peace came from within, and that peace could be found even in the midst of life's challenges. And so, Aiko continued to walk the path of Zen, resting in the present moment, accepting the world as it was, and finding peace in the stillness of each breath. Just as the Buddha had taught, she rested within the world, and in that rest, she remained awake to the truth of all things. A traveler arrived at the monastery of Master Taiki, tired from his long journey. He had heard of the master's wisdom and hoped to find rest, as well as some guidance, during his stay. The monastery was peaceful, nestled in the mountains, surrounded by tall trees and a cool, clear stream. The sound of the water was soothing, the perfect backdrop for quiet reflection. The traveler felt the weight of his many thoughts and worries as he entered the temple, hoping for a brief escape from the noise of his busy life. Monk Miko, who was serving tea that day, greeted the traveler warmly. She had a calm, welcoming presence that made the traveler feel at ease. He had heard stories of the monastery's simplicity and tranquility, but now that he was here, he felt something more, a sense of stillness in the air, a quiet that seemed to penetrate the mind. After a simple meal, Monk Miko invited the traveler to sit with her in the tea room. She carefully prepared the tea, filling 2 small cups with the hot liquid, the steam rising gently from the surface. The traveler, eager to relax, took the cup and drank it quickly, hardly pausing to savor the taste. He had been traveling for so long, and his mind was filled with restless thoughts, so he hurriedly drank, hoping to ease his tiredness. Monk Miko, watching the traveler, smiled quietly to herself. She had noticed how quickly he had drunk the tea, as if it were just another task to get through. After he finished, she asked softly, "How was the tea?" The traveler set his cup down and looked at her. "It was good," he said quickly, though his mind was still racing with thoughts of his journey. "I needed something to clear my head." Monk Miko smiled again, her eyes full of understanding. "You tasted the tea with your tongue, but did you taste it with your patience?" The traveler was surprised by her question. "I don't understand. What do you mean by tasting tea with patience?" Monk Miko paused for a moment, then spoke with quiet wisdom. "When you hurry through your tea, you do not give yourself the chance to experience it fully. The tea is not just something to drink quickly to quench your thirst. It is a moment to be savored, a chance to sit with the warmth and the flavor. But you must also bring patience to the moment. When you drink with patience, you can taste the tea deeply without rushing past it. You can experience the peace that comes with slowing down and being present." The traveler listened carefully, beginning to understand the deeper meaning behind her words. He had been rushing through life, always looking for the next thing to do, the next place to be, the next task to complete. In his hurry, he had missed the small moments, the moments that, if he paid attention, could bring him peace. Tea, like life, was not something to rush through. It was something to be savored, something to be experienced fully. Monk Miko continued, "In Zen, we learn to live with patience. Patience is not just about waiting for something to happen. It is about being present with what is. When we drink tea with patience, we are not thinking about what comes next. We are simply experiencing the tea, fully present in the moment. The traveler took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He realized that he had spent so much time focused on the future, on what was coming next, that he had forgotten to live in the present. Life, like tea, was meant to be savored, not rushed through. Master Taiki once said, Monk Miko continued, that when we drink tea, we should be like the tea itself, calm, warm, and gentle. We should let go of the rush and the noise and just be with the moment. The traveler sat quietly, thinking about these words. He had always been in a hurry, always thinking about what needed to be done, always looking ahead. But now, as he sat with Monk Miko, drinking tea, he realized that the true peace he was seeking could only be found in the present moment. He could not rush through life and expect to find peace. He had to slow down, to be patient with each moment, and to experience life as it was, without rushing to the next thing. For the first time in a long time, the traveler felt his mind begin to quiet. The racing thoughts that had occupied him for so long began to fade. He focused on the warmth of the tea in his hands, the gentle steam rising from the cup, and the stillness of the room. The tea was not just something to drink, it was a reminder to slow down, to be present, and to experience life fully. Each sip was a moment of peace, a chance to rest in the stillness of the present. Monk Miko watched the traveler with a soft smile. When you drink tea with patience, you open yourself to the present moment, she said. You allow the tea and the world to come to you without the need to rush. And in this, you find peace. The traveler nodded, his heart lighter than it had been when he first arrived at the monastery. He had come seeking rest, but now he understood that true rest came not from sleeping or escaping the world, but from being present in the world, from experiencing each moment as it was, without rushing to the next. He could see now that peace was not something that could be found in the future. It was here, in the present moment, in the tea he was drinking, in the quiet of the room, in the stillness of his mind. He took another sip of the tea, this time more slowly, allowing himself to taste it fully. He felt the warmth of the tea spread through him, calming his body and mind. With each sip, he felt more at ease, more grounded, more present. Thank you, Monk Miko, the traveler said, his voice sincere. I have learned something important today. I've been rushing through my life, always looking for something more. But now I see that peace comes from being present, from tasting the tea with patience. Monk Miko smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. You are welcome, traveler. Remember, peace is always here, in every moment. All we have to do is slow down and drink it in, like tea, sip by sip. The traveler sat quietly for a while longer, enjoying the peace that had settled in his heart. He realized that he didn't need to search for peace. It was not something that could be found in the future or in some faraway place. It was here, in the present moment, in the small acts of daily life, like drinking tea, like sitting still, like breathing deeply. As the traveler finished his tea, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the simple lesson he had learned. He had come to the monastery looking for rest, but he had found something even more valuable, the understanding that peace was not something to rush toward. It was something to be found in every moment, in every breath, in every sip of tea. He stood up, bowed deeply to Monk Miko, and left the tea room with a lighter heart and a quieter mind. He knew that his journey was not over, but he now understood that the path to peace was not in striving, but in slowing down, in being present, and in letting each moment unfold as it was meant to. As he walked through the monastery garden, he looked around with new eyes. The flowers, the trees, the soft rustling of the leaves, everything seemed more vivid, more alive. He realized that the world had always been full of peace, but he had been too busy rushing to notice it. Now he could see it everywhere. Peace was in the present moment, in the stillness of the world, in the quietness of his own heart. And so, the traveler continued on his journey, carrying with him the wisdom of tea. He would no longer rush through life, but instead would sip each moment with patience, allowing the peace of the present to fill him, just as he had filled his cup with tea. Monk Daigo had been with Master Katsu for several years, and in that time he had learned many lessons. Some were simple, others were deep, and some took time to truly understand. Daigo was a thoughtful monk, full of questions, and he often wondered how he could reach a deeper state of peace. His mind was often busy, and although he had spent years practicing meditation, there were times when he still felt restless. One morning, after his usual meditation, Daigo went to the river that ran beside the temple. It was a beautiful river, flowing steadily through the valley. The water was clear, and the sound of it rushing over the rocks had always brought him a sense of calm. Today, however, Daigo was feeling a bit different. He had been struggling with the idea of stillness. He had heard Master Katsu speak about finding peace by being still, yet his own mind often felt like a rushing river full of thoughts and distractions, flowing quickly with no clear direction. As he stood by the river, Daigo had an idea. He thought to himself, if I could stop the river's flow, if I could make it still, perhaps I would understand stillness better. Perhaps then I could calm my mind. So, with a determined spirit, Daigo began to gather rocks and large branches. He worked steadily, building a small dam in the river. The water surged against the rocks, and Daigo worked harder, trying to block the flow. He focused all his energy on stopping the river, believing that if he could just make the water still, he would be able to experience true peace. As he worked, he did not notice Master Katsu watching from a distance. The master had been observing Daigo for some time, knowing that the young monk's mind was restless and that he sought answers in the wrong places. Katsu walked quietly over to where Daigo was building the dam. When he reached the young monk, he stood for a moment, watching the water flow around the rocks. Daigo, deep in his work, didn't notice him at first. Finally, Master Katsu spoke. "Daigo," he said gently, "what are you doing?" Daigo paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow. He looked up at his teacher, who was standing calmly by the river. "Master," he said, "I am trying to stop the river. I want to make it still, so I can understand stillness. I believe that if the river is still, then I will find peace." Master Katsu studied Daigo for a moment before replying. "Daigo," he said softly, "stillness is not the absence of flow. It is the awareness that flow and stillness are one." Daigo looked at his master, confused. "What do you mean, master?" he asked. "The river is always flowing. How can it be still? I thought peace came from stillness, from stopping the movement." Master Katsu smiled, and his eyes softened with patience. "You see, Daigo, you are trying to stop the flow, but in doing so, you are missing the point. The river is already still, even as it flows. Stillness is not something you force upon the world. It is a way of seeing the world as it is, without resistance." Daigo looked down at the river, his eyes following the water as it moved steadily around the rocks. The water didn't seem to be struggling, yet it was constantly moving. He could hear the sound of it rushing, flowing, but there was a quiet rhythm in the movement. It was peaceful in its own way, even though it wasn't still. Master Katsu continued, "The river flows, but it does not fight against its own flow. It simply moves, accepting the path that is before it. It does not resist its nature, and in doing so, it remains at peace. The stillness you seek is not in stopping the flow. It is in embracing the flow, understanding that the flow and stillness are not separate, they are one." Daigo thought about this for a long time. He had always thought that stillness meant stopping movement, that peace came from eliminating distractions and calming the mind. But now, he was beginning to understand that true stillness was not the absence of movement, it was the awareness of the movement itself, without resistance. Master Katsu continued to explain, "The river does not seek to stop its flow. It does not try to fight the obstacles in its way. It simply flows around them, continuing on its path. Stillness is the same. It is not about stopping everything. It is about letting go of resistance, accepting the flow of life, and finding peace in the movement itself." Daigo's mind began to quiet as he listened. He had been trying so hard to control everything: his thoughts, his actions, his experiences. He had believed that peace would come when he could control the flow, when he could make everything still. But now he understood that peace came not from controlling the flow, but from accepting it. Master Katsu smiled at Daigo. "When you stop trying to stop the river, you will see that it is already at peace. When you stop trying to control your thoughts, you will see that your mind is already at peace. You do not need to stop the flow. You need only to accept it." Daigo stood quietly by the river, his hands resting at his sides. He looked at the water flowing smoothly past him, and for the first time, he saw it differently. The water was still, not because it wasn't moving, but because it was moving without resistance. It wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. It simply flowed, and in its flowing, it was at peace. "Master," Daigo said after a long pause, "I see now. Stillness is not about stopping. It is about accepting what is and being present with it." Master Katsu nodded. "Yes, Daigo. Stillness comes from accepting the flow of life, not from trying to stop it. When you let go of your resistance, you will find peace in the flow. The river, like your mind, is always moving. But when you stop fighting it, you will see that movement and stillness are one." Daigo smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He felt a deep sense of calm as he gazed at the river, understanding that true peace came from flowing with life, not fighting against it. He realized that he had spent so much of his life trying to control everything, trying to make things still, but now he knew that peace was found in accepting the flow, in letting go of resistance, and in being present with the moment. Master Katsu placed a hand on Daigo's shoulder. "Remember, Daigo, the river's flow is its nature. It does not fight it, it simply flows. You, too, must learn to flow with life. When you accept the flow, when you stop resisting, you will find peace. The river does not try to force its way. It simply moves, and that is where its peace lies." As the day continued, Daigo spent the rest of his time by the river, contemplating the lesson he had learned. He no longer sought to stop the flow of his thoughts or experiences. He simply allowed them to come and go, like the river's current. And in that acceptance, he found a deep, unshakable peace. Master Katsu, observing Daigo from a distance, knew that the young monk had begun to understand an important truth. Daigo had learned that stillness was not the absence of movement, it was the presence of acceptance. And in that acceptance, he would find the peace he had been seeking all along. As the weeks passed, Daigo's practice deepened. He no longer struggled to control his thoughts or his emotions. He accepted each moment as it came, allowing it to pass without resistance. His mind became clearer, his heart lighter, and his life more peaceful. Like the river, Daigo flowed with life, finding peace in the movement itself. One day, after many years of practice, Daigo became a teacher in his own right. He shared the lesson of the river with his students, teaching them that peace was not found in controlling life, but in flowing with it. He told them that, just as the river moves without resistance, so too must they learn to accept the flow of life, to let go of their attachments and find peace in the present moment. And so, Daigo's journey continued, always flowing with life, always at peace with the current. The lesson of the river had taught him that stillness was not something to be grasped, but something to be allowed. It was the peace that came from moving with the flow, without resistance, without struggle, and in that flow, Daigo found the deepest peace of all. As we journeyed through these Zen stories, we learned that true peace is not something we chase or force. It is something we discover by letting go of the past, embracing the present, and accepting the flow of life. Whether it's the wisdom of Master Joshu teaching us to release yesterday's burdens, or the quiet stillness of the river and the Buddha, each story reminds us that peace is found within, in the moments we stop striving and simply be. If these teachings resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What are you holding on to that you can let go of today? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. What did you learn from these stories? And if you're looking for more peace-filled stories and guidance on your path, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more wisdom. Let's walk this peaceful path together.